19th, 2024 meeting of the MCCSC Board of School Trustees. We ask that you please come to order. Tonight, we will begin with an additional appropriations hearing. After the administration's presentation, the public will have an opportunity to comment. For the hearing, we ask that each person limit their comments to 3 minutes and that the topic be limited to this hearing. There will be an additional opportunity to make public comments during the regular meeting. I declare this meeting open. Mr. Kenny, you may proceed.
Good evening, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, members of the board. The school corporation is funding the project through the issuance of general obligation bonds. The proceeds from this bond issue must be appropriated prior to being spent on the project. Notice of the hearing was advertised in the Herald Times. Resolution 2024-18, the additional appropriation resolution. The board must approve the appropriation of the bond proceeds to be spent on the project costs before any bond money can be expended. The amount of the additional appropriation is $15,850,000 and can be applied to the cost of renovation of and improvements to facilities throughout the school corporation, including site improvements and the purchase of buses and technology and equipment. Unlike appropriation of tax dollars, this additional appropriation of bond proceeds is not required to be approved by the Department of Local Government Finance. The second resolution is 2024-19, the final bond resolution. The final bond resolution establishes the amount to be borrowed, $15,850,000, the maximum term of repayment through January 15th, 2037, and the maximum interest rate not to exceed 6%. It also contains the details about the bonds, such as the form of the bond. This resolution also approves the form of the 9th Supplement to Master Continuing Disclosure Undertaking and the Registrar and Paying Agent Agreement. The Securities and Exchange Commission requires that a school corporation enter into a Master Continuing Disclosure Undertaking before it issues bonds. The school corporation has entered into this type of agreement previously. It requires that the school corporation agree to annually provide certain types of financial information to the SEC's EMA database and provide notice of certain material events on a timely basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny, for the information. Are there any comments from the board? Okay. We will now have public comments regarding the hearing. Have any cards been received regarding this hearing? No? Okay, thank you. We will proceed to the two resolutions mentioned in the hearing. As Mr. Kenny described, we will be adopting two resolutions tonight. The first is Resolution 2024-18, the Additional Appropriations Resolution. Do I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2024-18 as presented? It's been moved by Ross. Do I have a second? And seconded by Ashley, that we adopt Resolution 2024-18 as presented. All those in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2024-18 additional appropriations, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Next is Resolution 2024-19, final bond resolution. Do I have a motion to adopt Resolution 2024-19 as presented? Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Brandon that we adopt Resolution 2024-19 as presented. All those in favor of the motion to adopt this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you for all of those who have participated in this hearing, and it is now closed. We will now open the regular meeting of the Board of School Trustees. The first item, as always, is the celebration of success, a time to set aside, just time to celebrate members of our school community. Mrs. Harmon.
Thank you, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, the Board of School Trustees, and community members. It's my pleasure to share a few highlights of this month's Celebration of Success and Equity Spotlight Award winners. The Celebration of Success is a feature of every regular Board of School Trustees meeting. It recognizes the achievement of MCCSC employees, students, and volunteers who make a difference in our school community. For the November Celebration of Success, we would like to recognize the MCCSC Adult Education Program. Congratulations on earning the designation as an Indiana Adult Education Program of Excellence for the most recent program year, 23-24. The Indiana Department of Workforce Development created the Programs of Excellence Award to recognize adult education programs that exceed state goals and expectations in multiple areas of performance and serve as a model provider of adult education services in Indiana. Thank you for your exceptional work in supporting adult learners as they achieve their goals. And now the Equity Spotlight Award, which recognizes students, faculty, staff, student organizations, schools, and community partners for fostering inclusive environments that reflect the MCCSC vision, mission, and core values. This month's Equity Spotlight Award goes to Dr. Melissa DeGraff, 5th grade teacher at Arlington Heights Elementary. With warmth, empathy, and humor, she builds meaningful relationships with all her students. One unique highlight of her class is the opportunity to engage with the community garden during the fall and spring semesters. Each year, she focuses on building a sense of community, using the community garden as a unique way for her students to connect by sharing personal memories and family traditions. Former students fondly remember Dr. DeGraff's kindness and the sense of community she brings to her classroom every year. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Harmon, and congratulations to all those who've been recognized tonight. We will now receive our quarterly update on the activity of the MCCSC or the MCCS Foundation from the Foundation Director, Mrs. Helm.
Good evening, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, and school board members. So I'm in the back tonight for a reason. I'm on my computer. I am multitasking because the auction closes at 8 p.m. I did not anticipate this being over by 8 p.m. If we are, I'll go home with my computer. If not, I'll be back there closing the auction. And believe me, I know everybody who's in. We have 200 bidders right now currently, and we are at $18,020. So we $1,980 to hit goal. All that takes is one person to buy the safari. And it's an amazing safari because I bought it 4 years ago and went in July. So I'm just going to say, anybody ever wants a testimonial on that trip, it's amazing. So that's what we're working on currently. It will close tonight. But other things that we've been doing through this past quarter is our fall grants. We finished up, and I want to thank all of our building representatives. We have one from each building who comes in. They read all of these. They help us with this and make some really difficult decisions on funding. We awarded a total of $52,485 this cycle, and that is giving us 13 grants that are in the elementary library space. So that was a total of $13,570. Our curriculum and enrichment grants, there were 12 of those, totaling $36,215. And our science and environmental, there were 3 of those, totaling $2,700. So congratulations to all of the faculty members who got those. Our spring cycle will be opening right after the holidays. So we bring that up right in the front of January, closes off, and we try to get that awarded right before spring break. So I encourage everybody to go back in for that. Scholarships will also be starting as we come forward. So I want to make sure that I go ahead and talk about that a little bit. We are projected to award $25,000 in scholarships this year. Those get awarded in May, but the applications and all of that process will come online starting early February. So I just wanted to go ahead and make sure that we get that out into our school community before my next quarterly report, which will be probably when we're awarding. So those are things that are going on. I also today, Lily, where are you? Lily got to go with me this morning in her position with Director of Elementary Education, and we went down to General Motors. And they awarded us a community grant. We were one of 6 recipients receiving. We received $10,000. They gave out $60,000. That money is going into our elementary STEM program. A lot of it is going on to the STEM lab, and then part of that will also be going into Lakeview Elementary with our STEM accreditation process that they are working on. So I do want to also state a thank you to our reading, writing, bidding sponsors that came in at over 1,000. Those are Lamar, Cindy Glassman with State Farm, and Ivy Tech. So those are our sponsors through that process as well. Now I want to give you a heads up of where we're going. Okay, you know that everything we do is 100% fundraisers. We're completely privately funded through donations from businesses, corporations, and individuals. and also foundations like what we just mentioned through companies and some private ones. Next May, we are launching a brand new, save the date here, a new fundraiser, and we are partnering with the Kiwanis Club of South Central Indiana, and we're going to do this collectively. It is called the Great Duck Race Festival. So it's May 3rd, so mark your calendars. There's going to be a lot more coming out on it. We've booked Woolery Mill, so it will be at Woolery Mill. We are going to be lining up a lot of local talent, so we're going to be utilizing a lot of our talent through the corporation, a lot of our own kids. A lot of fun. Woolery Mill's handling the food for me, so I don't have to deal with that side of the world. But basically, it's a duck race. So you know what it is. You buy your chance at the duck race. We haven't finalized exactly how much the winners receive, so I can't share that with you. But I wanted to just give you a heads up of where we're going. So we wanted to kind of come up with something fun. One of the things that the board has really wanted to do is to kind of find a fundraiser that will really be able to engage our school and parents and communities together, showcasing a lot of our talent, and then also just having fun. So there will be a 500-minute reading challenge that will kick off in April. That's part of that. So to get kids more in the reading space or get them excited. So anybody who thinks they might be interested in sponsoring or helping with the event, just let me know. June will be our annual golf for kids, and then last but not least, year-end giving. So we also make a lot of our income through year-end giving. So if you're looking for a year-end gift, December 3rd, I believe, is Giving Tuesday. So if you're a Giving Tuesday kind of person and you like to get out there, just know that $53,000 in grants doesn't happen by itself. It takes everybody helping in to help make that happen. And a lot of our faculty are writing for some large grants. So we had a lot of them coming in asking for higher dollar amounts. So we want to be able to do that. And in order to do that, our fundraising has to be up there. So that's why I'm always asking. So, but thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you so much on behalf of the board, Mrs. Helm, for all of your work with the foundation. We will now continue with public comments. Thank you to those who completed a comment card and acknowledged the guidelines to speak to the board tonight. As a reminder, Mrs. Butcher will ring the bell once to signal you have 30 seconds remaining for your comment and 5 bells to signal that your time is concluded. And we will start with Eileen Wenzel.
Good evening. My name is Eileen Wenzel. I'm the mother of a current 3rd grader, a current 1st grader, and a preschooler. In April, this board told us that they were passing the baton on to the administration to provide them with a merger plan, or to tell them it didn't make sense to rebalance SES this way. The board called their administration their experts, and yet at the last board meeting, I was stunned to hear how quickly the board dismissed information from their experts. You have asked this administration to focus an enormous amount of time and resources on 2 schools. What about the other schools in the district, which include the largest populations of low SES families? Further, it is mid-November, and yet significantly more resources will need to be harnessed to execute something in less than 10 months. And as of last week, the administration was still hosting meetings in which there were more questions than solid answers. I came tonight because I want to thank this administration for taking the time to listen to and engage with community members, teachers, staff, and parents. This has been a refreshing change. These meetings foster critical discussion about the many complexities involved in minimizing additional disruption to our students, particularly those in grades 3 through 6 who have been most impacted by the global pandemic. I want to encourage the administration to keep advocating for our students, teachers, and staff. Importantly, I want to bring attention to the current 1st grade class. These students could potentially boomerang between 2 schools in 3 years. At the same time, they are taking a test that carries with it mandatory retention. And what about our current 3rd graders who don't pass and are merged? Further, these are the same students who could be merged and redistricted under this board's self-described moral, not data-driven leadership. I urge the board to do what one board member thought would be too difficult, a gradual rollout, in order to minimize the detrimental disruptions to these students. While I understand there remains a question about where the last ALPS class to transition will fit in at Fairview, which is out of space, it does demonstrate experience with a far more methodical, student-focused approach. Finally, we've been told by the administration there is no budget for this merger, and at no point would this become fiscally infeasible. How is this possible? What does this mean for the equitable resource allocation for our schools with the largest populations of high-need students? Please, for the sake of our students, do not rush this. Put in the time and thought required and allocate the resources to meet the needs of all MCCSC students. Logistics matter, and they matter more and cost more to lower wage earning families. Lastly, I want to encourage this administration to speak up if a merger is not the best way to rebalance SES. And I would encourage the board to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Katie Edmonds.
Good evening. My name is Katie Edmonds, and I have a preschooler and a first grader. A year ago, the board asked the superintendent to come up with a proposal for balancing SES in our elementary schools. We had grand visions of improved educational experiences for students across our 14 elementary schools, perhaps especially for those on the west side. Our then superintendent came back with a proposal that started with a very narrow mathematical definition of the word balance, selecting 2 schools at the top and bottom of a particular SES metric, and a method to bring their numbers closer to the middle. Thus, we would have a narrower range and better balance, completely leaving students at the 12 other elementary schools out of the process, and promising to take considerable resources to mitigate the challenges of splitting the K-6 model into primary and secondary schools at separate locations. One thing that's become clear over the last year is that we have a school board that's eager to take credit for good intentions without necessarily waiting to see if the intended results are achieved, and maybe without even helping to make those results possible. One example of this attitude became evident with the preschool expansion. Preschool expansion is an undeniably important project for the community. We have a shortage of affordable daycare, and MCCSC has a fantastic opportunity to help. Of course, the details of implementation matter. So ahead of the election, we had board members going on Noon Edition and boasting about how the preschool expansion will make more infant-toddler spots available in the community. That would be a great thing, but there's no guarantee that it'll happen. It's still possible that the preschool expansion could put our community early childhood education partners out of business, leaving us with fewer infant-toddler spots. So let's be honest about what we hope and what we've actually achieved, and work hard to achieve our goals. Similarly, let's be honest about how we can achieve meaningful SES balance across MCCSC and how we can really help the students who need it most. We have a superintendent who's put the work into really listening to teachers and families across MCCSC. I urge you to listen to the lessons she has learned from this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edmonds. We will now hear from Michael Burris.
Hi. First, I just want to appreciate the efforts and to improve the diversity. I think that is a good thing to be working on and something we should be doing now based on the last time the school district was redistricted. But I want to show my support for redistricting as opposed to the merger based on some assumptions. Obviously, we'll see the actual data tonight about that, but my assumptions for what that would show are the following, and each of these by themselves I don't think is a reason to do redistricting over merger, but combined I think they would be a compelling argument as to why we should do that. First, it seems like it will be a lot easier to redistrict than to merge. Through these past year, all of the challenges brought up by doing the merger would not exist with the redistricting, and the amount of time and resources, efforts to do those, to solve those challenges, which a lot of them would be, I think, poor replacements for what the merger would get rid of, do not seem worth it. And related to that, it feels like that the redistricting would be cheaper in both the short run and the long run. Cheaper in the short run based on all those challenges that wouldn't need the time and resources to take care of. And in the long run, because if we do this merger, there is still redistricting that would need to happen afterwards. We would finish this first project and then still have to think about the rest of the school district to take care of. Finally, my assumption is that this would be more effective. Redistricting takes care of the entire district as opposed to just 2 schools. We'd be able to help with the diversity and balancing socioeconomic status, as well as other diversities and keeping that age diversity in the pre-K through 6 model. And I think that's about it. Hopefully the proposal will show that, and I hope we take the information and do what's best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll now hear from Nicole Freeman.
Good evening. Tonight, I'm asking the board to have an open mind when listening to the merger proposals and redistricting scenarios. Last month, we heard the board completely disregard the admin's presentation surrounding a K-3 split being preferential to a K-2 split when it comes to academics. We heard the board completely disregard parents' concerns over what the transition process for the current 1st and 5th grade classes would be, or keeping siblings together on buses and how mitigating the additional unnecessary transitions would likely be infeasible, because that seems like it would be too hard. In September, we heard the board completely disregard a request to consider the redistribution of the Childs and Templeton populations to balance SES at those schools while still maintaining a K-6 structure, which came about from conversations with the MCEA. Over the past year, we've heard the board completely disregard child psychologists, world-renowned policymakers within the educational field, members of the general public, the NAACP, teachers, admin, and hundreds of parents who all spoke out against a split-grade merger being the answer to the district's SES imbalances. It's clear to me that up until now, most members of this board have thought that they know better than everybody else, that this board has had a vision of what SES balance looks like, and they have been unwilling to deviate from their preconceived notions. I'm up here tonight asking this board to let go of your egos, of your virtue signaling, of your need to save face or be right, and listen to what parents are saying. Listen to what the administration is telling you. Listen to what the MCEA is suggesting. Listen to the people who are putting in the work to make the most of a mess that you've created and do what is right by all MCSC kids. It's not a merger. Redistricting is the only way to truly balance SES within this entire district. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And last, we will hear from Jenny Noble-Kuchera.
Good evening, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, and MCCSC School Board of Trustees. I'm Jenny Noble-Kuchera, President of the Monroe County Education Association. And at our last Representative Council meeting, which was on November 14th, the representatives voted unanimously to have me speak to you this evening on behalf of our Childs Templeton Advisory Board teacher members. I refer to agenda item 8.05. So this advisory board has spent countless hours giving input leading up to your board decision. We agree strongly that our district needs to address equity issues district-wide. We also really want to minimize disruption to both communities. Teachers want to provide a stable situation for school climate and culture to flourish. This can only happen, though, if the timeline is feasible. A decision on configuration should be made as soon as possible, and only then can all the necessary steps be listed out in detail to see if teachers will have enough time to prepare for what students deserve. We are a super hardworking group, but we are not superhuman. Every day that goes by without a clear directive is one less day for us to collaborate and plan. So if the decision is made to move in a one primary school, one intermediate school direction, expecting an August 2025 start time is nearly impossible. There are just too many complexities to resolve within that timeline. Finally, please keep in mind that for this timeline, teacher working conditions are student learning conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you to all who provided comments tonight. This officially concludes our public comment time. And now for the consent agenda, that includes the following. We will be looking at voting on the memorandum for the executive session, minutes from the regular board meeting held on October 22, 2024. The memorandum from the executive session held on October 28, 2024. The financial report, October 2024. Appropriation balance report, October 2024. Register of Claims, November 19th, 2024. Payroll Register and Payroll Claims, October 2024. Request to declare as surplus and authorize disposal of out-of-date items. Do I have a motion regarding the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ashley and seconded by Brandon that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve this agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. Next, for our consideration are the donations. We have received donations of over $8,000. Thank you to all of our donors. We, as always, appreciate your generosity. Do I have a motion to accept the donations?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Kathy and seconded by Brandon? Ross? Okay, that we accept the donations as presented. All those in favor of the motion to approve the donations, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion does carry. Next, for our consideration is the personnel report. Do I have a motion to approve the personnel report as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ashley and seconded by Brandon that we approve the personnel report as presented. Dr. Henderson.
Good evening, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, and members of the Board of School Trustees. This evening, I would like to call to your attention the following administrative change of status and retirements. We have an administrator change of status in Christine Reitzman, being recommended to replace Christy McBride, who retired as the Director of Career and Technical Education at Hoosier Hills Career Center. Mrs. Reitzman has been serving as the Assistant Director of Hoosier Hills since August 5th. Certified staff retirements, Catherine Rodemaker, teacher of drama and language arts at Bloomington High School South. Mrs. Rodemaker has been serving the students of MCCSC for 33 years, most recently serving as a teacher of drama and language arts at Bloomington South. Support staff retirements, Teresa Wood, a cook at Highland Park Elementary School. As one of our dedicated cooks, Mrs. Wood has literally been serving students of MCCSC for the last 14 years, most recently as a cook at Highland Park Elementary School. At this time, I request that you please approve the recommendations as presented in your board packet in the personnel report.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Do we have any comments from the board? Okay. All those in favor to approve the personnel report as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion carries. We will now move on to the contracts.
One thing, please.
Yes?
On behalf of the MCCSC, I'd like to extend a special thank you to these retirees for their many years of dedicated service, and I would also like to invite Mrs. Reitzman to the podium to address the board.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Henderson.
Good evening, Dr. Winston, President Hennessy, and school board members. Thank you for this opportunity to lead as the director of Hoosier Hills Career Center. Career technical education is a vital part of our educational programming here in Monroe County Schools, this region, and our state. I look forward to the continued advancement of our student apprenticeships, internships, employability skill development, and technical trainings. Hoosier Hills Career Center is proud to prepare our students for employment, enrollment, and post-second enlistment so that we may have a strong workforce that leads to a continued thriving community for Monroe County as well as this Indiana Uplands region. I appreciate that you have entrusted me with the ability to educate, empower, and engage, empower, and educate the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reitzman. Hoosier Hills is definitely a vital part of our community, so we appreciate you so much. Okay, now we will move on to contracts. Do I have a motion to approve the contracts as presented?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ross and seconded by Ashley that we approve the contracts as presented. Mr. Kenny.
Thank you. I recommend approval of the contracts as presented in your board packet.
Okay. Do we have any comments from the board on these contracts today? Then all those in favor of the motion to approve the contracts, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? The motion does carry. Tonight, we have several district updates to be presented. We will begin with a report on redistricting from Dr. Winston and our consultant from Business Information Services, Mr. Preston Smith. Dr. Winston.
Thank you, President Hennessy. In February of this month, this board issued a resolution indicating their desire to have a study of redistricting as part of our effort to
Balance SES. And subsequent to that, Mr. Preston Smith was hired as an external consultant to come in and examine our boundaries, our data, our enrollment. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Preston Smith from Business Information Services to share with us the findings of his analysis and his report. Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Winston. I appreciate that. And also, Board, I appreciate the chance to appear before you tonight and give you this update. Let me set the stage for a little bit of my firm's background. We have done around 300 projects in 17 states for the last 20 years in school districts with redistricting. We've done all kinds of data analysis projects. And basically, what we wanted to start with in this project, it was not a pure redistricting project. We wanted to look at the demographics because it's important to figure out where your enrollment is headed before you can accurately draw any kind of redistrict lines, talk about any kind of merger. You've got to understand whether or not if the enrollment's going up or down in order to figure out what your capacity of your buildings are in order to make the whole system work. So that's why the first thing I'm going to approach is going to be the demographic study. We use several different sources for this information. We use vendor data, much data from the state of Indiana, the city of Bloomington. We used the U.S. Census. We did interviews, labor statistics. And what we found is that basically your enrollment's been fairly flat line for the last 30 years. So your enrollment has changed very little. In fact, in 1989, you see 10,279, and today about 10,200. So in 40 years, it's been very stagnant. Our data projects that every indicator is that your enrollment is going to decrease over the next decade, and the question is by how much. We estimate it could be as much as 4.7% decline or as little as a 3% decline. But every indicator is it will go down. And the reason being is because, one, you've got an aging population here. Your over 50-year-old populations grew almost 3 times what the the school-age population has. The birth rate has really cratered. You've got a 24% decrease just since 2008. One of the biggest decreases I've seen anywhere in the country. Your under 5-year-old populations decreased about 10%. Your number of childbearing age females decreased also about 3%. You look at the census, you had a 12% increase in the 60-year-old age group projected for the next decade, and you had a 36% increase from 2010 to 2020 in the census in that same age group. So it's a very aging population. It's very common in college, university towns to have that happen because it's a very favorable place for people to retire. It's got good health care, usually good transportation available to people, and it's a very favorable place for people to retire. Your school-age population is expected to decrease by at least 0.2%. And again, it's going to have a great impact on your enrollment because there's just simply not going to be the kids there. Sorry about that. Where is it going to grow? There are going to be a few little pockets, like right here, triple-digit increases in very small localized areas. But for the most part of the district, you're going to see decreases. So it's not going to be any kind of what increases do occur, it'll be very localized. We received several questions from your staff about what about this large housing development project that's possible, the 4,250 new housing units. It was approved by the city back in the spring. Well, our analysis shows that the most number of new students you could have per year is about 101, and that's across 13 grades. That figures out to be about 7 new students per grade per year. But this is using a calculation that is incredibly generous to the kind of demographics you'd have here in this community. That's based on a national average of like 0.4 students per single family household and a 0.1 per multifamily. And you don't even come close to that, not even close. But these are the proposed neighborhoods in that development. This breaks down how many students there would be for each yield in those developments. And this breaks it down by year. So the total number of students we're talking about is 676, spread out over a 7 to 10 year plan. I tried to contact the developers of this. I tried to contact the city of Bloomington multiple times to find out. Basic question was, what financing had these developers lined up? And no one responded. So that was a fundamental question. And given this economic environment, I don't think we can be too optimistic that a development like that would easily receive funding until mortgage interest rates go down quite a bit. Now, here's a statistical analysis of whether or not there's a relationship between single-family homes and your enrollment. The black dotted line shows what it should have been. And there are some districts I work in that actually show this. Basically, every time there's a new house built, they get a new student. That's the black line. Here's your line. And what it shows statistically is that every time there's a new house built, you actually decrease enrollment. Does that make sense? No. But that's what it shows. I mean, since 1986, in your community, you've built 15,200 new homes. But during that same time, your enrollment's changed 19 students. So does that make sense either? No, but that's what the numbers show. We actually matched student addresses to every single parcel on the tax rolls. We had an 88% match rate, which is really pretty good. What we showed that only 7.5% of the students live in houses that are built within the last 10 years. It just doesn't happen. So students and their families do not live in the newer homes because they're not affordable. You've got a real affordability problem in this community because the median income is about $250,000 and their median house value is about $350,000. There's a $100,000 gap. So that's why the older people that are more established that have the money are able to buy the homes. So basically, that's why families are not coming here. We looked at the private school charter enrollment, and we estimate that around 2,000 to 3,000 students are going to these schools. Again, that's a draw. It takes away from your enrollment. Finally, we looked at your capacity, and that's a very important element to look at in any kind of redistricting. The national standard is there's supposed to be an 85% utilization of the schools, and that's the benchmark for efficiency. And we've looked at thousands of school buildings. And your buildings, I actually have toured several in the last 2 days. Your buildings are unusual because some are amazingly inefficient. We also included a classroom count use. We looked at gross square footage under the roof, and also looked at the number of students per classroom. So we had 3 different analyses. And what we found, you've got an incredibly low utilization rate across this district. Here's what it shows for the elementary. Right now, currently, you've got about 71% utilization, which is really low. And you do have some schools, when we average out all 3 of those methods, that's the red areas, you have some that are actually doing pretty good. That are, you have Childs, is particular, almost 90% utilization. You got Summit that I looked at and walked through today, it's like 87%. But then you have others that are almost half empty. You got one here, Clear Creek, about 60%. So that's a big thing to consider in any kind of redistricting because you want to make maximum use of your space. You need to use it efficiently. And right now, it's not working. It's not being efficiently used at all in your elementary. Look at your middle school, and it's even worse. But the reason that's just an issue is because the bachelor's middle school is probably the most, truly the most bizarre middle school I've ever seen, being 4 stories and huge and cavernous. But then we go to the other extreme today. I went to Tri North, and beautiful building, but still, it's only about half utilized. And so the utilization for it is incredibly low too. Even though there's 569 students, I estimate there can be 1,150 in that building. It's interesting, today I looked up the Indiana state law. There's actually an administrative law that says they look for 30 students per one student for each 30 square feet in a building. So there's 30,000 square feet of actual classroom space at Tri North. So it should, under Indiana law, to hold 1,000 students. But here's like one schematic of a floor there at Tri North. The yellow are office space and meeting space. The red colored are classrooms, and the blue is storage. And that's just one floor. It's astounding. But I went back after I walked through the building today and rechecked the schematic. Truly, only 19% of the total building space is used for classrooms. And this is a big limiting factor that's going to affect how you're able to redistrict because these buildings are just so inefficient. And even though you're just looking for elementary, in order to make the feeder systems work, you're going to have to also look at changing students in the middle school and the high school ranks. Here's your high schools, again, only a 69% utilization. All right, so we stretch this out to 2035, and because your enrollment's going down, your utilization is going to go down too. So in 10 years, you're going to be at 66%. And so let's shift gears for a second. We'll go to redistricting. And we did consider 14 total scenarios. And what we looked at, the reason there's 14, there's essentially 7, but we used 2 different rosters. We used the 2023 roster and also the 2024-25 roster. So one scenario, we looked at try to balance the capacity levels. Then we looked at, for Childs, do a PK2 to a 3.6 for Templeton. Then we wanted to balance the free and reduced percentages to maximize that. We took a merge between these two, Templeton. But then we merged Templeton and then balanced the free and reduced percentages. That was all one scenario. We even considered one closing Childs. And that's something we would typically do because when you look at a utilization percentage that is as low as yours, you have to assume that there would be opportunity to close some schools. And so it's a typical thing that we would do. And then we looked at changing Childs to go 4.6 and Templeton P3. All right. And here again, the same ones. We did not run one because we just ran out of time in the presentation. It's too time consuming. But it's essentially the same one that we looked at before. Again, here's a huge problem with your redistricting. And it's because you've got so many students that are crossing the boundary lines. They actually live in one attendance zone and go to another school. And in 2024-25, you got 1,129 elementary students that go to schools elsewhere. The yellow cells are the ones that actually attend the same school that they live in the attendance zone. But all the non-yellow, the white cells, those are the ones that would go to schools across attendance boundaries. So for any redistricting to work, you're going to have to nail down and make sure a policy holds true that if you live in that attendance zone, you go to that school because it doesn't work any other way. So finally here, we look at the maximizing the capacities. And we have 2 different scenarios because we use 2 different rosters. But what we tried to do here is to balance the lines across all the different schools. And it is to be this column right here that we try to maximize the capacities to make the most efficient use as we could. And what we did there, that'd be involving changing among the elementary schools only 1,622 children. They'd have to change schools. That doesn't count the middle school or high school that you'd have to change to in order to get the feeder systems to work. So not only would you make the change in elementary, you'd also have to make changes up the ladder in order to get the feeder systems to work. The reason being is for bus transportation and everything else. Because it's not just a change of standalone for the elementary. You have to change middle school and high school. And we wanted to equalize what you call the SES, I call it free and reduced lunch percentages. This is what this does. Now, it balances out quite a bit. What we have in the columns here in order to read this, we have over here the current enrollment, and then we have what they call, I have the geocode columns. Those are where the students physically live. So, as it's been pointed out to me, that if you just made the students go to the school in which they live, your percentages like at Childs would go from a 15% to SES to 30%. But under this plan, if we tweak the lines a little bit more, we get to 42. So we actually take them to 15 to 42. It's a big increase. That's the biggest increase we had in any area. But across the board, the standard that we're trying to reach in all this is that we had the median, which is like 42 or 46, and we wanted to go 10 to 15 points above or below was the range. And if we accomplished that, we would assume that we were as close as we could get in the range. Now, the Rogers Benford, that's a difficult one because that's an outlier. Because without making students ride buses for like 2 hours, you cannot really increase the free and reduced percentages on that one at all. So that's an outlier that we really have to just throw out in this analysis. But in equalize this, you have more students that will be changing because it's more intensive, and it'll be almost 2,000 students would change schools. And then we look here again, the last what would be to merge, and this is a PK6 merger, and we did not calculate how many changing schools there because, I mean, really it'd be like a non-factor kind of thing. And then here it is again with a different roster. So in summary, what we're talking about is that there's going to be a slight enrollment decline in the next 10 years, but it will go down. The charter schools and the private schools are going to continue to give you competition, and it will be tough. It's just going to be more competitive. The district's going to have to innovate to maintain competitiveness and to figure out how to optimize your resource allocation. Redistricting, we have provided many scenarios. We do need some direction from the board about what direction you want to take. The utilization is going to always be an issue unless you decide to close some schools, because there's going to be some inefficiencies built in, because your enrollment is going to keep going down. And your strategic adaptation, you're just going to have to innovate to see how to stay competitive. So that's all I've got. I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions from our board from Mr. Smith after this presentation? Erin?
Sure.
Yeah, you looked like you were going to ask a question.
Got questions. Yeah, so thank you for this presentation.
You bet, thank you.
I think for one of the scenarios, you told us how many children would have to move. I may have missed it, but I was particularly interested in, for scenario number 3, did you say how many children would move?
Well, the maximized capacity was like 1622, and the maximized free and reduced lunch was almost 2,000. It's like over 1977, I think.
I do want to just say to the public, because I know that was a lot of information really quickly, we do have this demographic information and then some, but this will be posted on the website, so it will be available either tonight or tomorrow at some point. Is that right?
That is right, probably tomorrow.
Okay. So you will have access to this data, so you can comb through it a little more, at your leisure.
Yeah, I think it's a 180-page report or something like that.
It is.
All right.
My other question, just quickly, was you mentioned a few times that if we change the elementaries, we would also have to change our middle and high schools. We don't have a direct feeder model where certain elementaries feed middle and high school. Does that change?
Well, I mean, you're still going to want some semblance of alliance to at least match up. I mean, because every district I've worked in, you've got to have some kind of, you can occasionally split an area so that it doesn't have to be purely to one or the other. But you've got to get the lines to line up. So there will be some students that will have to move. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to manage the enrollment. You won't be able to track it. So you do have to change those lines too.
We do actually have some patterns of how our elementary schools track to our middle schools and track to our high schools. So I just wanted to point that clarification out.
I was going to say, we do have a feeder system to some extent, but it isn't like some districts where elementary schools directly feed into, like, say, a high school. It's like through the middle school range, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know.
But it sounds like with the transfers, we don't really truly have a feeder system if we have all these transfers.
Yes.
Absolutely. When you got 1 out of 5 students that are transferring right now, you truly do not have a feeder system, because I've said before, and I've told other folks that you've got a system here where it's, I wouldn't say completely unwieldy, but it's a district your size with this many 5,000 elementary students, you should probably have no more than 100, not 1,100 that are transferring the lines.
I was definitely shocked by the number of transfers that we have.
I do want to point out, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that also accounts for the programs like the ALPS where we ask kids to transfer to a different school.
Yeah, to a point there, that does account for some of the students. You got other students that would be like your special ed students that probably changing schools and all that. But for to have that number, it should never be that high.
No, I hear that. I think that the sort of non-permissive transfers is a small part of that. But yeah, thank you.
No, I mean, you got a big challenge here. We've given you a lot of information, so what we do is just wait for your direction of where you'd like to go. But we have provided options. We worked in many different redistrict projects around the country, and yours is not difficult. I mean, it's just you just need to figure out what goals that you want to have.
One question that came to mind because I didn't quite pluck it out of there. On the classroom utilization model, what's our usage across the 3 middle schools? Not the average when you average all the utilization models, but just based on classrooms.
Yeah, I don't have that memorized. I mean, overall it was like 52%.
Right.
For classrooms, your utilization probably down a little bit lower than that too. It might probably in that range.
Okay.
Still, like I said, I didn't memorize the number.
Right. No, I appreciate
But the reason being is the design of those middle schools are really atrocious, and you just can't get a whole lot of use out of those.
Well, I didn't mean on the total square footage. I just
Per
mean
classroom use.
Yeah.
Even then, the available classrooms of those is really, really bad. It's when you have 19% total classroom space available in your newest building, that is just incredible. I mean, and it doesn't even meet the standards that you expect for even the state of Indiana.
Do you have questions? No, I don't. Okay, so anyone else?
Just go. No, you're fine.
This is more of a sort of high level question. I know you said that what you need from us in the terms of the next steps is some direction. What sorts of does that mean? You want us to say we want more information on this number of scenarios, or what kind of information do you want from us?
I mean, ideally, when I work with the district, the board comes back to me and says, here's the 3 factors we want in the order that we want them. Number 1 is we want the SCS to be highest priority. Number 2, we want your capacity to be the number 2 factor. Number 3, we want to consider transportation of students or safety to be a factor so that we don't bust kids for an hour. So those are usually what I get back from the board when we reach this point, and they say, okay. And then when you give me the direction, you want your SCS percentages, go ahead and tell me what you want the range to be, if it's possible. Do you want it 10 points above or below the median? Do you want 15? And from there, I'm able to say, there's my range. Here's are the scenarios that fit that criteria. And then I'll come back to you and say, here's what we got. But if you, the truth is, if you want it to say, I want them all to be equally weighted, what you'll end up with is a product that doesn't actually serve anybody because it's going to miss the mark.
Right. So we would have to prioritize, for instance, capacity and dealing with capacity in our schools to create greater efficiencies, or we would prioritize free and reduced lunch, which wouldn't necessarily solve our capacity problems.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you got a capacity problem that you've had for quite some time, and in my way in thinking a more permanent solution, that's going to be one that's going to last longer for you because the free and reduced lunch percentages, actually people get different jobs. People do move in that area, but areas that have children, they're more likely to have and meet the capacity levels on a more continual basis. So for something, when we draw these lines, you don't have to go through this process again every 2 or 3 years. I like to wait 10 or 15 years or more or longer. But a more permanent solution is going to be looking at capacity on a percentage basis. And not only that, I mean, ideally, if you say, well, we go ahead and explore the opportunity to either close the school, and when you do that, your utilization is going to go up automatically. And then you could say free and reduced would be easier to balance, and it would be. That would be a fast solution for utilization change. But as long as you've got the overcapacity that you've got in your system built in, and you're trying to maintain all the square footage that you've got, the utilization is not going to ever come out right.
But to be clear, so that people listening understand this, dealing with capacity and utilization would mean closing schools.
At this point, yes. Because you've got right now, in your system, you can hold, under the gross square footage basis, almost 17,000 students. Under the architect's numbers that I saw today, that your district architect generated, you can hold almost a capacity of 14,000 students. You're almost 10. So even using an architect where he has a self-interest to sell you new buildings or add on to the ones you have, even then the utilization is way out of whack. The only way you're going to get that fixed is to close a school or two or three.
And maybe this is obvious to everyone but me, but the benefits of maximizing utilization are primarily financial in nature, or what are the many?
Well, it's not just a one-time residual thing. It carries on because you've got utilities, you've got maintenance, you've got ongoing cost for upkeep. You got HVAC that needs to be replaced, and I've worked in districts where we're talking millions and millions of dollars in upkeep that they do on an annual basis. So no, to do that, and we're not talking, most districts when they do close schools, they talk about transferring people within to another building. So you're not saving in staff, but you are saving for the structure. So I realize here in Indiana it's a different story about what your laws are about charter schools, but I really am serious about what the economics of that are.
And what you're referencing in terms of the charter schools, in case everyone doesn't realize, is that in Indiana, if we close a school, that means that building is available for a charter school, which presumably then would have an impact on our enrollment, which also has dollars attached to it.
Right, so if a school has been used for educational purposes, it can then be, or must then be sold to charter schools, or it must be available, unless we utilize that building, and there are some new legislation that just sort of came out within the past couple of weeks, unless that building is used for certain kinds of things after the fact, right? So saving some of the dollars would only be the case if we decided to relinquish that building and not to use it for those purposes, right? If we held on to the building, we wouldn't necessarily see the same kind of cost saving.
This is true.
If we wanted to hold on to them so that we didn't then have to relinquish them to charters, so that we would lose sort of that space and building space. So yes, thank you for bringing that up, Aaron.
Well, I'm sorry to make that clarification, but you are in a difficult position. But I'm telling you that the numbers bear this out clearly. That with your enrollment declining and with already a huge amount of capacity, this is a problem that really should have been taken care of about 10 years ago. And now it lands in your lap at this time. So, but I'm sorry, but that's just the way it works.
No, I appreciate that. And actually reading through this report, all 180 pages of it, because that's how I am, has been enlightening. So thank you.
Okay. Well, if you have anything else, let me know.
Anything else from the board? Questions for Mr.
I do
Smith?
have one question with regards to transportation. In your experience, when you go through these kinds of things, what have you seen come about with kinks in the system with transportation? Does it make it more difficult? Is it?
We have seen transportation improve drastically in most districts we have, because right now you've got pricing redundancy, because you've got schools very close together, you've got a very dense population with your enrollment, and by, I wouldn't say closing some of a school or two that's more in the inner city, you're going to actually see your bus transportation efficiency go up way high. We've done bus routes for districts that we've worked with, and the efficiencies are amazing. So I realize that the transportation costs are high. You paying for bus drivers, the maintenance on the buses. But no, in nearly every case, you're going to see a huge improvement in efficiency in buses. And so there again, that's another savings, not just the structure of the building, but another effect of that. I mean, I didn't come up here and didn't start this project with the intention of doing that. We just looked and we saw the utilization percentages being so low that we realized that the school closure is definitely, it has to be on the table.
When we set priorities and weight those priorities, it's clear that utilization and balancing SES could be priorities. And could other things be moving the fewest number of students?
Absolutely, it should be.
Could we also factor in? Would you help us calculate the savings or the cost for each of those? If we said
yeah, I'll be glad to work with your finance office to see what we can come up with and do that too. I mean, at your disposal as an independent to review here to do this and to do it right. And we've worked in many school organizations that we know what the pitfalls can be. You're at the point right here that it's I've been in situations far worse than this. I mean, you're in a spot that doesn't need to be taken care of. You doesn't need to. You can't kick the can down the road continually, and that's what's been done to you to this point. So you need to take care of it now, and otherwise, 10 years from now, it's going to be even worse. It really will be. It's not going to get any better. And I realize I'm very sensitive to the parents that have either bought homes in these areas. They're happy with what they've got. But the realities are that it is time you have to make a change, and it's a point that it's a hard one to swallow, but it's a reality that has to occur. You do not have the enrollment to maintain the kind of square footage footprint in all these buildings that you've got. You just can't keep it up. It's not efficient. It's not. And you might have teachers that love teaching kids that have 12 to a classroom. They might be even happier when you take it down to 8, but you can't just keep going. You can't go down that path. You can't keep doing this. And I poked my head in many classrooms. I did see classrooms that had 12 kids in it. I saw some today that were just packed to the gills. You couldn't get another kid in there. But is that fair for those school buildings that have the kids pushing 28 and 29 elementary kids when you got another building down the road that has 12? Where's the equity there? So we're talking about rebalancing that the best we can. But I saw it for myself the last couple of days when I went to about 80 of your buildings.
Did you say that that it makes the most sense to close a building that's on the inside where the population is more dense?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, you look at like Marlin take it for example. It's a small building. It's on the outskirts of the area, but it serves a large area. So it's one that initially I would say, gee, we should close that one. I went there today and I said, there's no way. It's used too much. It serves too many people. You can't do that. So I know your dense population where you've got in the inner city, it's got to be one of those schools. And I mean, I didn't come here with a black hat and have like guns blaring for Childs. It was just one that rose to the top saying, okay. But I don't have the architect analysis that shows the age of the building, the future repairs that you need. I don't have all that information, but I chose Childs because, okay, it was close to Templeton and it seemed like reasonable to make the easy switch. And we actually split the Childs students up among 3 different other schools. So, but no, it would have to be an inner city school.
And also, I remember we talked with some other school districts that worked with you in the past. And is it true that you and your company, if a school district wants, will continue to work with that school district after the fact too, to continue to reevaluate?
Sure. I mean, we do that. I've done some redistrict projects with districts for the last 15 years. Worked with redistricting board members, attendance lines, and also district lines. So we've done it on an ongoing basis for a very long time for some of our clients.
And continue to watch, like I think one was saying, you would keep every year, even if they weren't doing something big, you would give them a review of kind of where they are that year.
I do that too, and usually without any charge.
Yeah.
Well, we like that part. But it does sound like, short of incentivizing people to have babies, we are looking at a population decline, right? And so the foundation has a new job.
Yes, you are. I mean,
Mrs. Holm is back there shaking her head no. She says that's not our job. No, I mean, I think we came into this thinking very much about how do we balance the district in terms of this sort of equity balance. And what we are discovering too is that we also have capacity issues and utilization issues. And it is definitely something for us to look at and consider. I mean, but it is also, like, I think one of those things that makes people's like stomachs drop or like seizes up their hearts, because I know I had that reaction as well, to think, well, no, we can't close our schools, right? We love our schools and we, but I do understand what you're saying. I do understand that it is not a problem that looks like it's going to resolve itself in a different kind of way.
Well, Madam Chairman, I'd like to make one more point. It was to be that not so much people need to get in their head clearly. It's not what they'd be losing with the school, but think of it as essentially cutting off a branch in order to keep the rest of the tree alive. Because you're going to be able to take those resources that's going to that school, and you're able to spread it across the other schools and make them stronger. You're going to be able to put new programs there. You're going to be more efficient in your bus routes. You're going to be able to offer the district. It will be stronger because of that. But by you carrying a weak school along, it's half full, and has other inefficiencies with it because it sort of breeds upon itself, then you're hurting the other schools too. It's not just one, but you're hurting all the healthier schools, the ones that are you're putting those 30 kids in that classroom up at Marlin. That when you got 12 kids, another one, and that's the inequity, and that's what the healthier schools are suffering. So the point is, when you take away the one that's weak, you make the other stronger.
The other question, you said Binford is an outlier because there really is no way to change those boundaries in such a way.
Not really. Not in order to increase the free and reduce their SES percentage on that, unless you have to transfer the students for a very long ways.
What about Fairview? Is it also an outlier in some way?
In some ways it is, because that's where your concentration is for your SES students. And you have also, it's incredibly concentrated even within that area. You have like one small parcel area has 104 students, and 50 of them are free and reduced lunch. And you take that one block, one little area, so we're talking a few hundred feet, and move that area to another school, and all of a sudden their percentages change wildly. And no matter where you send it, you're going to drastically change the percentages by moving that one piece. But no, it in a way is an outlier, and in our maximum capacity, our maximum percentage, we tried to alter that. We were able to get it down about 10 or 15 points, but that still is about all. Because the more you piece away at that, the more difficult it becomes for the other nearby districts. I mean, you can gerrymander this really all day, and I have done this for your district to gerrymander to move the students in many different ways. But you have to also look at it practically that you really do not want to move those students for long extended bus rides just for the purpose of equity or balance. And so practically, you only go so far. I mean, one other thing you talk about closing a school in the inner city. Another one that was on my list was for Arlington, because it's also one that is a little bit questionable about where its location is, and also where the number of students were there. So that was one that would also be a possibility. But even by just closing Childs, it increases your efficiency to about 92% utilization. So just overnight, one would pull it up to get your utilization higher, and then you could tweak your free and reduced percentages and get those fixed pretty good. And that may even carry you for a while. So that's just I wouldn't say a quick fix, but that'd be one way that would be a way to clean up fairly quickly. Well, I apologize for going this long, but I wanted you to get a thorough understanding of where we're at and what we've done, and to let you know that we're here at your disposal to do whatever that you want.
Thank you so much, Mr. Preston. Any last questions for him before we let him take a seat? Okay, thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we will move on in this portion to hear from Dr. Dowling, Director of Early Learning and Enrollment, who will present information on the expansion of our early learning pre-K programs. So, Dr. Dowling.
Good evening, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, and members of the Board of Trustees. I'm here to present an update on early learning in our district. I'm going to start with our pre-K enrollment numbers. This is a great place to start. I do want to start first, though, of course. Our expansion is something we're proud of, but I really want to acknowledge the foundation of early learning that's been in our district for a long time. Our expansion has been successful because of the long tenure and history of our teachers and our instructional aides who've been supporting early learning in our district for a long time. This is our enrollment numbers. We currently have 319 pre-K students in 13 elementary schools. Students to be eligible for pre-K must be 4 by August 1st. I will, just to make some nomenclature that we use in our district, in our office, pre-K is for 4-year-olds. And preschool is for 3-year-olds. That may not be typical everywhere, but that's kind of the terms that we use. So when I refer to pre-K, I'm talking about students who are 4 by August 1st, and when I'm talking about preschool students, I'm talking about 3-year-olds. This is our enrollment as of November 13th. We are continuing to enroll in our building, so if there are families in our community who are interested in joining our pre-K classrooms, we still have room, and we'd be happy them to join our classrooms. We have also partnered with 5 early learning partners in our district. These are the 5 are listed there. We currently have 44 students whose families are receiving tuition subsidies to attend those 5 providers. These are all providers that we have a board-approved agreement with. The subsidies range from $4,000, $6,000, or $8,000 over the course of the year, based on the income of the family, and they do need to be MCCSC residents. Right now, the estimated cost is $201,000 for those 44 students. There are additional costs. One really great benefit of this program has been a continued and connection about service of students with disabilities in our pre-K providers. So we do conduct evaluations. We send speech pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists to these sites. So that's not included in the $201,000, but that is part of MCCSC staff who does attend and serve students at these facilities. Just to give you a snapshot of the increase, in 23-24 we had 184 pre-K students or 4-year-olds in MCCSC facilities. Reverting back to the 319 students we now have, that's an increase of 135 students, or a 73% increase of 4-year-olds in our own locations. If you include the 44 students at our partner sites, that gives a 97% increase of 4-year-olds supported by our district. We do have preschool in both the Early Learning Center, Hoosier Hills Child Care Center, and elementary sites. We continue to have infant and toddler care as well at the Early Learning Center and Hoosier Hills Child Care Center. To be really transparent about our guiding principles for expansion of our pre-K program for this school year, and then our preschool expansion will be for next school year. The things that really have guided us in the decision making as we worked with the community has been making sure that we are improving access and accessibility while maintaining and focusing on high quality programs, using metrics to ensure we're tracking the success of our programs. This has been an investment of our community into our early learning programs, and we want to make sure that our students and families are getting great benefit from this investment from our community. We have been really mindful to be cognizant of the impact our expansion has on the overall health of the early learning community in our town, including infant and toddler care. We've worked to form a young child advisory group that's focused just not on early learning students, but all young children. Although the first focus has been to talk with our early learning providers about how the pre-K expansion is going. We had members of this group include our community providers, other local early learning organizations, local community organizations, and of course MCCSC administration and early learning staff. We had our first meeting in October. We'll have our next one in December. The meeting in October was focused on getting feedback about how the pre-K expansion was going, to start collaborating on the model for our preschool expansion for income-eligible families, courtesy of the family-centered and community-focused referendum. So we've been working on that model. And to get to the end of my presentation, that is the focus of the Young Child Advisory Group. We'll continue to talk about what we want our preschool expansion to look like. This will be for qualifying families. We estimate my office receives calls from families who apply for some state funding, and then they find out often that they sometimes unfortunately don't qualify, and those are the families that this referendum is targeted. So although it's been really hard this year, it's been great knowing that next year, that gap that we're really aiming for with the referendum, we'll be able to support those families next year with subsidized preschools. So we're estimating we'll be adding between 50 and 125 preschool students, both to our MCCSC locations and with continuing partnership with local early learning providers. I'm going to take a second because although that was my presentation on early learning, we're also talking about Templeton Child's merger considerations. And instead of talking about early learning later, since I'm already up here, we thought it would make sense for me to talk about now. We have 4 pre-K between Childs and Templeton. We currently have 4 pre-K classrooms. My recommendation has been that we consider this location to include a preschool classroom. That's based on a long history of having preschool at Templeton and Childs and its location in town. So I'm recommending that we consider 5 early learning classrooms for the primary building. I've worked with both building principals to identify if whether Templeton or Childs is their primary building, which of those 5 classrooms would be. We would work this summer to get those classrooms prepared. This is something that we have a lot of experience with getting ready for the pre-K expansion this year. There might be some additions we need to do, such as cubbies. That's a NACE and pass the quality requirement. And then we'd work with our state licensing consultant to get the rooms licensed this summer. Like I said, this is something that we did for the pre-K expansion, so we're very familiar with the process, working with our building operations team and getting those rooms ready. Thank you.
I turn this off. Thank you, Dr. Dowling. Any comments from the board?
It's very exciting to see all that growth and that improvement. I mean, this is such a huge thing for equity, and our state has really failed to deliver on that. And then things like Head Start has been underfunded, not able to do so. And then there are always people in the bubble. So I'm super happy to see this happening, and I thank you and your team and everyone for that work. And I'm so thankful to the community for having passed that referendum so that we can do this for kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually have a question. So we heard from one commenter earlier that, you know, one of our claims was that hopefully or potentially there would be more space for some of the younger age groups as some of the other sort of students shifted around throughout those partners and also into our rooms. And the sort of claim was that then it still continues to put our care providers at risk. And I was just wondering, as you talk to our partners, if you've heard any indication that that they're now suffering as a result of this move to pre-K in MCCSC.
Yeah, I can focus on the 5 that we have partners with. I'll recently visit them to continue to get feedback. One shared that they had 3 who left their facility who came and join our pre-K program, but then they took 3 families off their waiting list and now we're full again. All the ones I've spoken to recently, either similar situations where they either filled off their waiting list, or if they have openings, it's fewer openings than they had in previous years. So again, those are really focused on the 5 that we have partnerships with, because those are the ones I've had the most discussions with. But based on those 5, like I said, either reduced their waiting list or they're in the same position they were before.
Thank you. Yeah, that's basically what I've discovered in my own inquiries to different providers in town, but I just wanted to have some confirmation of that publicly too. Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I've got one. So as we expand preschool next year, the 3-year-olds, I know you mentioned state funding for families, etc. So would a family, I'm trying to establish the relationship of the CCDF vouchers and our referendum funds for subsidized preschool, and how those will work together to maximize our enrollment.
Yeah, excellent question. So if a family qualifies for, say, preschool for CCDF funding or on my way pre-K for 4-year-olds in our current program, we always access that funding because we want our dollars, we're going to be fiscally responsible, we want our dollars to go as far as possible to serve as many students as possible. So my office, if we believe you're going to qualify for on my way pre-K, we assist you through that process to assist the family, but also assist our corporation in getting the funding for that student.
Okay. So that would be a first line, and then our funding would go on after that for those that didn't qualify.
Exactly right.
Great.
Great. Any other?
I have one quick question. Thank you, Dr. Dowling. You mentioned that you have experience expanding pre-K quickly in light of the merger considerations. Would you anticipate, and this might be too preliminary, please feel free to say that, do you anticipate any construction needs if we were to expand pre-K in one of those buildings?
Nothing major. I mentioned cubbies in there because that is an absolute requirement. And we have our own internal staff actually builds cubbies for us, which is great because they build them exactly the size that you want that fits great in space. So, there's always bathroom considerations, but a bathroom is not a requirement for state licensing. So we have, that's always a preference, but it's not a requirement. So it would be, a review of whether those things are feasible and economically responsible, but it's not a requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dowling. We will move on to our transportation update. So Dr. Jeff Henderson, Assistant Superintendent of HR and Operations, will provide that update for us at this time.
President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, members of the Board of School Trustees, thank you for the opportunity to present an update on the status of our transportation department this evening. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the collaboration of Director Scott Waddell, Assistant Director Jacob Carmichael, and Head Mechanic Dennis Hobbs for their assistance in conducting a comprehensive internal review of our transportation department. During our review, Scott, Jacob, Dennis, and I looked at several key topics, and I plan to spend a few minutes this evening sharing some key findings regarding our fleet overview, driver and staff composition, our operational efficiency, some performance data, our ridership and service, some information about fiscal management of the department, safety and maintenance, and identify some opportunities and some challenges that face the department this evening. Director Scott Waddell is in the audience this evening and can also assist in answering any questions that the board may have following the presentation. So we began our internal review by focusing on an overview of our fleet. We currently have in our bus inventory 147 buses, including 106 diesel, 13 gas, and 28 electric vehicles. We have 10 additional EV buses that were previously ordered and are pending delivery this winter. And we also have 2 team buses that were previously ordered and are also pending delivery. In our daily operations, we run 94 routes covering 8,267 miles per day for a total of 1,496,327 miles per year, excluding deadhead mileage, field trips, and extracurricular trips. For those of you that don't know what deadhead mileage is, that's the mileage that's unladen. There are no students on the bus. It's traveling from the depot to the start of the route or from the end of the route back to the depot, or in some cases between routes if there's a significant delay in the end time of one and the start of the other. So that mileage is not included. This is just routed mileage carrying students back and forth to school and home. Last year, we conducted 1,469 field trips and extracurricular trips, covering an additional 92,187 miles, and that doesn't include our small activity buses. That's an opportunity that we'll talk about just a little bit later. We have 96 buses in operation, 26 buses that are held in reserve to take the place of any bus that's out of service for any reason. We have 14 buses, 8 activity buses, and we have 13 buses that are marked for future trade-in that are waiting on those transactions to take place. We also spent a little bit of time looking at the age of our fleet. Our diesel buses range in age from model year 2014 to 2021, with an average age of 8 years of our diesel fleet. Our EV buses are some of our newest in our fleet, and they range in age from 2020 to 2024 model years, with an average age of 2 years. Our gas buses, which are our small activity buses, some of those are gas, they range in age from 2009 to 2018 with an average age of 10 years. We also have the 4 athletic buses, 2 of which are about to be replaced, that range in age from 2013 to 2015 model years with an average age of 10 years. Given the large geographic size of our district and the number of miles that our buses travel annually, we typically look to replace buses at about 10 years of age, just for a point of reference. I want to spend a little bit of time reviewing the EV history in the MCCSC. In 2018, we began investigating EV buses, and in December of 2020, we took the very first delivery of EV bus number 1, our very first EV bus. In December of 2021, we added EV2 and EV3, and then between the time period of fall of 2022 to the winter of 2023, 20 additional EV buses were added to our fleet. In April of 2024, 5 EV activity buses were added as well. In May of 2024, MCCSC was notified by the EPA of an award for the purchase of 25 additional EV buses. In December of 2024, 10 previously ordered buses will arrive. After taking advantage of the EPA award for 25 additional EV buses, By March of 2026, our EV fleet would total 63 buses. We also spent some time looking at our driver and staff composition. We have 96 employed drivers, including 11 substitutes. We have 4 on-call drivers who work regularly. And we also have 14 other staff members that hold CDL-B licenses that are available to drive in emergent situations. We also employ 2 athletic drivers who take midweek athletic trips that leave before the end of regular routes. We have 22 bus monitors, and all are assigned daily due to special needs requirements, student safety, and behavior management. Our quantity of drivers is dependent upon route design and student need. Based on our current needs, we're fully staffed with drivers and monitors, and we have enough substitute drivers to cover our absences and illnesses most days of the week. Looking at our operational efficiency, some of this will be a repeat from the October board meeting, so I'll just cover this very, very briefly. Our on-time performance is 99.41% with only 59 late runs out of a total of 9,939 that were analyzed. Our response to ridership requests when new students are added to a route, if they live within proximity of an existing stop, they can oftentimes be added within a day. Sometimes, in a recent situation when I was at the transportation building meeting with Director Waddell, an individual was added to the afternoon route. They were close enough to a stop, they had moved into the family, they got the student to school that morning, but we were able to add them to the afternoon route to take them home that very same day. In the outside areas, students can sometimes, it can take us 1 to 5 days for new stops to be developed if we don't have a stop. Sometimes the director of transportation or assistant director of transportation will have to travel to the location where the home is, figure out a safe bus turnaround, and that can take a little bit more time if you have to reroute that entire route for that driver. But typically 85% of new riders are added within 2 days of a request. Our coverage plan for absenteeism, I mentioned that we have 11 substitute drivers that report daily and additional support from our CDL staff if necessary. When drivers are reporting ill, substitute drivers are assigned to fulfill those routes. If we have leftover substitute drivers and we have monitors that are out, those substitute drivers will fill those monitor positions as well. And again, if sub-drivers are insufficient to cover all the absences, other employees like mechanics, maintenance personnel, and transportation staff who possess that CDL-B license can step in and fill in on those routes. And sometimes we also will split a route where nearby buses will take half of a route each and increase the capacity of those buses if we are lacking coverage. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but this was shown in the October board meeting, just showing the trend line of average minutes delayed per route and average lost instructional time continues to trend towards 0. So that's a real proud point for the staff. Our daily ridership consists of 6,568 students, including 275 students with disabilities, 40 unhoused students, and 191 pre-K and preschool children. That represents 65.28% of our student enrollment. Our average ride times for one way are 23.61 minutes for general education students, slightly shorter for students with disabilities at 22.05 minutes. And then our unhoused students who typically are further distances from the schools that they attend have a little bit longer ride time of 28.89 minutes. Our ridership eligibility, as you know, is determined by catchment zones, walk zones, and safety factors such as proximity to major roads. If we have families who live within the 1 mile walk radius of a school, but their student is required to cross a major thoroughfare, we will provide a bus for that neighborhood so that those students don't have to cross that major thoroughfare to ensure the safety of our students. We currently don't have any formal surveys that have been conducted with our parents, and feedback is typically received through phone calls, but we are discussing plans for a future survey with the transportation department. An interesting fact, our fuel costs monthly are approximately $45,000 for our diesel buses. That's with diesel and bulk purchase price at $2.60 a gallon and gas at $2.40 a gallon. Significantly cheaper than you would pay at the pump if you were in your personal vehicle. So there's some factors there for additional maintenance costs or annual maintenance costs associated with buses. So that's brakes, tires, repair and maintenance, oil changes, washer fluid, windshield wipers, all the kinds of normal maintenance items that you would consider on your vehicle at home. You notice that those maintenance costs for our fleet are excluding our EV bus costs in 22 or 23, 24 and 24, 25. I'll talk a little bit more about the EV maintenance on the next slide. So in taking a look at our electricity costs in comparison to the same costs associated for fuel to transport students, we took a look at data from 360,829 miles of EV fleet use to generate projected cost savings for our current fleet of 23 EV buses. The energy cost calculation of $28,456.81 is based on the national average of 10.09 cents per kilowatt hour, allowing for half of the cost to be recovered by our solar canopy at our transportation department. Okay? For your reference, the energy costs in our district range between 10 cents per kilowatt hour and 11 cents per kilowatt hour, depending upon who the service provider is. So we utilize the national average of 10.09 cents for purposes of this calculation. Diesel buses would have required $117,269.43 worth of fuel based on our bulk purchase price of $2.60 a gallon and an average fuel economy of 8 miles per gallon. So that's generating a resulting fuel or energy savings cost of $88,812.61 over those 360,829 miles traveled. So fairly significant savings cost in terms of energy. Additionally important, but not necessarily quantified in terms of dollars, but generally accepted as an environmental benefit of EV transportation, our EV fleet has resulted in a reduction of 1,483,487.5 pounds of CO2 emissions over that distance traveled. So that's certainly a benefit to our community and to the air quality that our students and our families are breathing in the areas where we're transporting students. Talk a little bit about our EV maintenance costs. We currently have an annual maintenance agreement that's in place with our bus provider for $105,000 annually. And the majority of the maintenance costs of our EV buses are currently covered under warranty. So there's not a great average that we have right now of what the overall costs will be on an ongoing basis. So we looked at an estimate based on national averages of about $11,760 per bus for annual maintenance costs. When we talk about safety and maintenance and the turnaround time, the average repair time for diesel or gas buses is about 1 to 2 days, although some delays may occur due to parts availability on more rare parts like a turbocharger or something like that that's a little more rare to replace and not something that we necessarily have on the shelf at the time. Our EV fleet repair times vary a bit more widely, and the most significant repair delays for those vehicles are parts availability and warranty authorization. But over a 162-day period that I was able to analyze, we averaged up to a 90% uptime rate for our EV bus fleet. So some good numbers there. And I shared a little bit of information for you on historical accident claims. These are bus accidents that resulted actually in an insurance claim. And according to our insurance agent, MCCSC's accident rate per mile driven, given the size of our district and the mileage that we drive daily that I shared a little bit earlier, is well below the average. So our insurance agent is pretty happy with us. So when we talk about the opportunities, I mentioned earlier that MCCSC's received approval for an award from the EPA to expand our fleet by an additional 25 EV buses, which would result in a total of 63 EV buses in our fleet. And we also recently just learned that HV3, that's high voltage 3 training, is now available for our corporation mechanics. And that is a new development for us. Additionally, as the software for the smart charging infrastructure for our EV fleet continues to evolve, we'll have greater insight into performance and cost savings that we are experiencing as a result of deploying EV buses. The department continues to engage in route optimization studies each school year to determine the most efficient way to transport students, and we want to administer a survey with our families to gain insights into how we can improve service and rider experience. A couple of the challenges that we have identified: staffing. Although we are currently fully staffed, if we change routing and that requires additional drivers, staying ahead of those staffing needs and getting drivers onboarded is really important. So predicting those needs takes about 2 months to get a driver onboarded and trained and ready to drive. So there are some factors of timing there that are really, really important. And one of the other significant challenges that we deal with are supply chain issues. They are particularly touchy around the areas of electronic parts still. Ever since COVID happened, we've seen a delay in the production of chips and computer devices. So in summary, I'm really happy to report to the board that our transportation department is functioning well and is well positioned to be successful moving into the future. Most importantly, our students are consistently arriving to school safe and on time. Our staffing levels for drivers, monitors, and mechanics are appropriate for our current fleet size and our routing configuration. Our maintenance staff is well positioned to enroll in training classes to achieve the HV3 certification, which will allow our mechanics to work on the high voltage components of our EV fleet, and this will be critical as our EV fleet size increases. Data tracking systems are in place to monitor efficiency, and the transportation team is constantly looking for ways to improve data collection and analysis. So again, I want to thank you for the opportunity this evening to share information with you about the good things happening in our transportation department, and certainly open it up to any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Henderson. Are there any comments from the board?
So as I exit in my role of school board, when I came on 8 years ago, wow, what a huge difference the transportation has been, even in the last few years. And I am so thankful that not only that we have the referendum to help increase the pay for our uncertified staff so that we can be more competitive with like Taco Bell to get people into these positions. We're so fortunate because I know so many other school districts around the state and around the country are struggling. But also just that shocking like time rate of getting kids to school on time is so huge. And the technology, I mean, I just think that people are really good at seeing what's wrong, but wow, this is like a whole presentation on what's right, and I'm really, really happy to see it. So I'm grateful to everybody who's worked all these years to have that happen, and I'm so happy that it's environmentally friendly. Like that is just a huge, huge thing that our district is doing that right now.
Thanks, Kathy. Anyone else?
I have one question. Thank you, Dr. Henderson.
Sure.
I agree with Kathy. Most of my experience with transportation is as a parent, and the reliability from the past 2 years to this year is just amazing. So congratulations to you and your team on that. I think a year and a half to 2 years ago, we made a change in the technology, the app that parents can use to track the bus, and the cards that the kids use to scan in. Do you have any update on that piece of it? Has that been evaluated at all to see if that's been effective?
I would actually have to turn to Director Waddell to give me additional information on that. That really wasn't a part of the internal review that we just completed, but
the app has been well received. We have people that forget their password, and we know lots of people are using it because they forget their password or forget how to log in, and they'll contact us and reach out. So I think the app has helped tremendously. The buses are for the most part on time, but it's a great help for when we have a weather situation or we have construction. I don't know if anybody's driven Walnut in college lately, but You just never know what's going to happen trying to go up and down those roads right now. But so they can, I think it's very well used. I would like to, part of the survey would be asking, what we could do better there, what people think in that, having that availability, that app. And for those of you who don't know, the parents and students can track the bus on their phone and see how close it is to their home for pickup. So it's very helpful. We also send out notifications through that app if we know there's a delay, or if there's some reason we are 15 minutes behind due to having to travel down College. Then we can send out a notification that say that, hey, we're about 15 minutes behind schedule, so the parents have an idea of, oh, okay, don't panic because they already told me it's going to be about 15 minutes late tonight.
It's a little like tracking your Amazon delivery, 4 stops away.
Yeah, it's like Life 360, which we track our kids on, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. As we move on with our district updates, we move to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Kenny, who will present on funding goals 1 and 2, local funding. Mr. Kenny.
Thank you and good evening again. Just making sure the slides are up. Is that it? Just keep going. Okay. Again, good evening. I will be presenting on local funding goals number 1 and number 2. I have also included some additional information and slides that help to put the 2 MCCSC referenda in context and provide a wider lens for viewing MCCSC finances. The 2021-2025 goals and priorities from the strategic plan revisited here with funding goals number 1 and number 2 as a part of the overall strategic plan. Funding goal 1 is to increase funding from local sources through community-approved initiatives. Funding goal 2 is to expand funding based on needs and evaluate expenditures for sustainable enhancements. The outcomes are to increase available funding through a local referendum and to utilize referendum funding to advance the strategic plan. Referendum Fund number 1 was voter approved in 2022. It highlights diversity goal number 1 and equity goal number 3. Referendum Fund number 2 was voter approved in 2023 and highlights equity goal number 1 from the strategic plan. What we are doing, Referendum Fund number 1, as we will remind, but it increased salaries of teachers by $4,500, and it increased support staff wages by $225 per hour. Additionally, there was spending allocated of $1.2 million to cover special education services, performing arts, STEM special programming, and additional staff support services. Referendum Fund number 2 expands free and affordable early childhood education, eliminates student and family fees, funds student instructional materials, and funds career education program costs. The impact of referenda: increased wages for employees, expanded free and affordable early childhood education, reduces the burden on families for procuring instructional materials, and eliminates fees for AP and ACP testing. The timing of the referenda: first referendum fund number 1 was approved in November 2022. In the spring of 2023, the state capped the referendum that we had just passed and all other referendum at 3%. A future slide will show that in 2024 we were not affected by that cap because our AV grew by 2.97%, but I get ahead of myself. November 2023, we approved referendum number 2. And in March of 2024, they permanently signed the caps into law, but recalculated things that makes our referendum capped at 6% annually, at least for 2025. A reminder that the first referendum will sunset or finish in December 2030, and the second one will finish in December 2031 without a plan for renewal. Referendum tax cap impact. This slide shows the first year of the 2022 referendum. The baseline year of 2023 shows that we expected to receive 17.4 million, and we received 17.4 million. There was a 3% cap on the referendum in 2024, but our AV grew 2.97%, so we were unaffected by the cap, and we received what we expected at 17.9 million. The budget we put together for 2025 will have an increase to the amount we received this year to the level of 6%, which is the cap. And that will increase the referendum total dollars received by 1.1 million. But we wanted to show that that cap will keep us from receiving 1.3 million. So we'll get an increase, but not the increase that we like to think that the voters approved. And that is due to the difference between the AV growth of 13.1% and the cap of 6%. That reflects that 1.3 million lost or we weren't allowed to receive. The 2025 expected budget that's submitted to currently to DLGF, board approved or board adopted. It's $187,697,000. I'd like to point out that the two referenda funds make up 18% of the total tax or state budget for 2025. So significant. Thank you to the voters. A large piece of the total 187 million. Funding overview. We have six state funded amounts, state or locally funded. 5 are property tax funded. The education fund is state funded. There are 2 debt service funds and 2 referendum funds. Locally funded is the equivalent of property taxes. The education fund allowable uses include teacher wages and benefits, education supplies. A reminder that up to 15% of state aid may be transferred to the operations fund. The components of the Indiana school funding formula. This is the predominant funding source for the education fund and teacher wages and benefits. The basic grant is what most of us think of as the funding mechanism for the education fund. It is ADM times the per student amount each year. I looked it up this for the current funding that we have. The basic grant makes up 88% of this school funding formula. So the other 4 make up the other 12%, and they include academic performance incentive grants, the special education grant, the CTE grant, which is Hoosier Hills here in our district, and the NESP grant for non-English speaking students grant. This red line slide shows ADM over the last 6 years. 2020 is the 2020 school year, so that count is the fall of 2019. Something happened between 2019. 2021 is fall of 2020, 6 months after March of 2020, where we had a decline, most people believe, due to COVID. Our numbers have stayed low since then. The predominant thought in the first year was that they will bounce back, but we can see from this graph they have not. Here we show the ADM state payments, which is the total of those 5 areas, including the basic grant on the earlier slide, 88% of the 2020 amount of 73 million would have been ADM times per student amount. We show the per student amount for each year on this slide as well. We bring the last 2 slides together to show that even as enrollment declined, the state aid has gone up. The reason it goes up is because the per student amount goes up. Otherwise, the two would be pretty much in sync. And this shows that we still get increases, although not anywhere near the increase we would have had would enrollment have held steady over that time. Cumulative loss due to ADM decrease. The baseline year of 2020 shows that we had ADM of 10,897. So we wanted to show a scenario where had we stayed at 10,897, what would our revenue have been? Or conversely, what would we have lost? What did we lose by it not staying at 10,897? So we show the loss years from 2021 to 2024. The cumulative loss is adding up 2021, 2022, 2023, and 24. And then we project a loss of 5.2 million in the budget year currently. Again, a theoretical loss, but it does provide some context had we kept ADM at 10,897 and not had declining enrollment. The same information on ADM is in the purple bars and the orange bar to the right. We've included a staffing or teacher FTE that was calculated as of 10/1, the exact same day that these ADM numbers are certified, or the number will be certified in the future, but that's the count day, 10/1 of each year. And we show in the box that it is certified teachers, including part-time teachers, not just classroom teachers, but all the certified teachers we have in the district. Future headwinds, 3 of many, expenditures outpacing revenues, declining and inflation, declining student enrollment, and legislative changes. Legislative changes are already affecting us quite a bit, and there's some other people smarter than me that have hinted to us what might be coming this spring. So we're very aware of that, trying to monitor it as early as possible and make the right decisions because of that. Thank you, and any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Questions from the board?
Did they ever fix complexity? Did they do anything? I knew that Urban Schools was trying to change it and get it back to give them more money. Do you know anything about that?
It does change slightly each year, but I haven't heard any like fixes or larger amounts. We still view it as the addition of the basic portion and the complexity equals the per student amount.
Right. I think they increased like English language learners, the money that they got per that. But obviously kids with higher needs cost more money to educate, and that's what complexity was supposed to do, is to provide that, and they've been shortchanging it since around 2015 across the state. And then I was wondering, how does special education money work? Does it come from the federal government and then the state decides how much, or does the state have? You don't have to answer me now, you can tell me later, but it just occurred to me when I was looking at that.
The part you saw here comes as part of the state funding formula monthly, but we also have special education grants from the federal government that we monitor that are not part of the tax funds, but are significant dollars to the district.
And in your circles of IASBO people, do you know what kind of changes they're talking about making to the property taxes?
I know
That's
that's
the rumor. I'm saying the rumor.
that's the right phrase, is
Right.
they're coming after property taxes, but I haven't heard concrete rumors as to we think it's going to be this or something like that. Just the changes are coming to the property tax formula or system or caps.
I feel like your headwind slide should have been a tornado. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Kenny? Okay, thank you so much. We will now move on. Oh, yes, yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. We will move on to our monthly update on the consolidation of Childs and Templeton Elementary from Dr. Winston.
Thank you, President Hennessy and members of the Board of School Trustees, for the opportunity to provide this important update on the status of our Childs Templeton planning efforts. Tonight marks my 5th monthly update to the board in our community. When my team and I began the planning process back in July, we committed to ensuring a transparent process where the voices of our teachers, staff, and families could be centered. The 3 essential components that have driven our efforts have included these 3 areas: community engagement, review of best practices for a successful merger, and to conduct a comprehensive facilities assessment. I am pleased to confirm that during the past 142 days, we have fulfilled our promise in each of these 3 areas. We have consistently and doggedly adhered to this established framework for achieving an equity-based, integrated approach. We have listened, we have learned a lot, and we have leaned into our ability to lead with integrity, humility, and transparency. As a friendly reminder, this is the project charter that really has led and directed our work from our very early days back in July, and the expected deliverables we will be reporting out on at the December board meeting. This is the framework that we also have utilized to make sure that we are paying close attention to all of these areas based upon the work of the Regional Equity Assistance Centers. As a friendly reminder, the demographic makeup of these 2 schools is as follows. You'll see on the left the enrollment for Childs, and you'll see on the right the enrollment information for Templeton, which we have shared at previous board meetings, so I won't repeat that tonight. This data, however, has served as a foundation for several aspects of our community engagement planning. Throughout the past several weeks, we maintained a robust and aggressive community engagement schedule. I want to thank Dr. Finley, with direct support from Assistant Superintendent Harmon, for their leadership and commitment to delivering on our promise. Dr. Finley will now provide a detailed overview of our engagement journey from July through November. I'll click for you.
President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. In early July, we were given the task of engaging the community in meaningful discussion and collaboration around the Childs and Templeton merger. For the teachers, staff, and family members who have been a part of these conversations over the last 4 months, you'll see many of your considerations, your thoughts within the slides that are coming up here. I'd like to publicly thank everyone for taking the time, the energy. A lot of time was spent in the evening collaborating, talking about this work. It was important time spent with the community, and the teachers as well. I can't thank you enough for that time. Total, there were 27 Childs Templeton merger meetings. Over 40 hours were spent with key stakeholders within our community. It's been a formative process, and we've learned along the way, and we've listened, and we've added sessions as needed. We started with 18, we ended with 27. And along the way, we learned that, we needed more forum time with the entire community to make sure we gave people an opportunity to speak. We changed our format. The first one was very formal. We heard that we needed more informal discussion time, so we added more meetings. We added meetings specifically for parents of students with disabilities, as we discussed. With the greater community, we learned that we needed more time with those families, so we had some good intimate conversations with them. Our in-person meetings were held at the CoLab, Bloomington High School South, Jackson Creek Middle School, Childs, and Templeton. And the online forum, which so far it's 70 and growing, we still receive some today. We received a lot of information from that. It did guide a lot of our conversation, and we're thankful for everyone who turned those in. We absolutely read every one. At this time, after looking at the numbers, I'd like to talk more about the story involved behind those numbers and the process that we underwent to engage the community. First and foremost, it's important to know I have a close personal connection to both of these schools. I student taught at Templeton Elementary School. I have very fond memories from that time. It's where I learned to teach. Great school community. I spent many years, 12 years, as a principal of Childs Elementary. You can't spend that much time and energy and effort in a place and not genuinely care about the outcome and what happens in that community. We do have people on our admin merger team who have children involved in both of these schools, so we fully understand the importance of getting this right. The parent advisory group and the teacher staff advisory group were both chosen by the building principals to ensure diverse representation. We wanted to make sure that we were hearing all the voices in the community. So we've had great conversations throughout our time with a lot of different people, great people around the table. We had good community forums. We had a lot of good discussion. In fact, the discussion guided a lot of our work over time. We learned a lot from all of our discussions. The bottom line is too, with teaching and with our teachers, teaching is much more a lifestyle choice than it is a career choice. I come from a family of teachers. I think most people have a calling for this. The teachers that have poured their hearts and souls into the programs in both of these communities, and they've made them the communities that they are. They're both great learning communities. They're both great places for children, and we can't thank them enough for all of their work. I think everyone in this room would agree children are not chess pieces, and any decision that we make is going to be challenging. Anyone that said this process would be easy simply didn't have the families, teachers, and children in mind. There's nothing easy about this. If we hadn't spent the time and energy on hearing from everyone involved, the final options and considerations would not have been complete. It was time well spent over the last few months for sure. At the beginning of this process, MCEA, our teachers union, had a list of about 70 questions for us to consider. We always appreciate their questions. In fact, it always makes us better. And so we started with those questions, and from there we started highlighting some topics. And you'll see those topics there that were points of discussion throughout this time. Ultimately, as an administrative team, we understand that our goal is to maintain safe and stable school communities, ensure quality curriculum and instruction for both schools, minimize disruptions, and do it in a fiscally responsible manner. Again, none of this is going to be easy. With each decision that's made, there will be complexities. I think that's the word we landed on. And these complexities will be involved with each decision. So we have identified many of these complexities, and it's our hope that they will inform the board's decision in December. At this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Winston, and we're going to discuss some of the complexities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Finley. And thank you to all of the parents, teachers, staff, and administrators that have participated in this engagement process. Complexities. To say that merging schools is full of complexities is definitely an understatement. Throughout our engagement in our planning process, our teachers, staff, and families readily shared a number of challenges or opportunities that needed to be tackled. Dr. Finley just highlighted a handful of complexities that we needed to solve. To be clear, for every complexity, there is a solution. As educators, We are beyond adept at successfully finding solutions to the complexities that we face in our schools each and every day. I want to talk just a moment about decision point complexities. I've included this slide specifically to highlight some of the most essential decision point complexities that we have encountered on our journey. On the left-hand side of this slide, you will see 3 identified complexities that require an answer because the answers to these complexities directly impact other key complexities. 1, grade level configuration, 2, building selection, and 3, implementation timeline. Building selection and grade level configuration decisions directly impact the 3 items in the green box on the right because of the corresponding cost implications. At the October board meeting, the CSO architects outlined several considerations for renovating one, both, or neither of our 2 buildings, while also providing the anticipated cost estimates. In addition to potential renovation costs, my team is projecting costs associated with transportation and staffing that must also be considered. When you look at the building renovation, the transportation, and the staffing, there are potentially significant costs involved in at least 2 of those 3, but potentially the 3rd one as well. You'll notice the arrows down below to the gray boxes because the information from those decisions will definitely and directly impact and inform our operations, our programs, and our services. In order for my administrative team to do our part, there are 6 essential decisions that must be made. And the next slide here attempts to highlight what some of those decision points are. Decision point 1, timeline. There are 4 boxes there highlighting potential timelines. 1, full merger that would happen and begin in fall of 2025. 2, a phased merger, which could happen starting fall 2025. A full merger that could happen starting fall 2026, or a phased merger that could happen starting fall 2026. Grade level configuration. Are we going to go with a pre-K 2 and a 3-6 model, or a pre-K 3, 4-6 model? Building. Which building is going to house which grade levels? A 4th decision area, renovation for Childs. No renovation, optimize ADA accessibility renovation, improve the playground renovation, create more classrooms, or add additional bathrooms for K or pre-K. Renovation Templeton, decision number 5. No renovations, create more classrooms, add optional bathrooms for K or pre-K. And decision point number 6, transportation. Shuttle walkers, transport walkers, or direct routing. As you can see, there are complexities in each of those 6 decision points, and they will also continue to inform our operations, our programs, and our services. During the next several minutes, members of my team are going to outline a number of factors that we have examined in the areas of operations, programs, services, curriculum, and safety. I'm going to begin with Dr. Henderson, who will provide a review of human resources and operations. Dr. Henderson.
I think on the next slide.
Well, I apologize. I forgot to do this slide. Okay. So these are the things they're about to talk about. That's supposed to be my preview.
Very good. Thank you. President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, members of the board, thank you again for the opportunity to present this evening and share some information around the areas of transportation, logistics, food services, and staffing. You heard a comprehensive construction plan earlier at a previous board meeting, so I'm not going to spend time discussing that this evening. When we talk about transportation considerations, we looked at several factors. The impact on families, including the departure times from their home necessary depending upon what option of transportation is selected. The number of buses that would stop at a home depending upon what is selected in terms of 3 plans. I'll talk about those 3 plans in a little bit more detail. We also considered the number of walkers in proximity to each given school. and the number of bus riders in each in proximity to the school in their ride zone. We also talked about the quantity of routes, drivers, and monitors necessary depending upon each plan. The complexities that were already mentioned about grade level configuration, building selection, multiple options for how to get students to the appropriate building for classes, and the impact of those decisions on routes for other schools because we operate a multi-tiered system where buses serve multiple buildings at different times throughout the day. And the amount of time between the end of one route and the start of another route is critical in determining whether or not that bus is able to make that second route. So the three routing options that were considered were just current routes continuing the way that they are with walkers who are in the walk zone of a given building, continuing to walk to that building, their school of residence or their catchment zone, and then shuttling those students to the school of service depending upon what grade level they are. So that's one option. Expanding routes to include walkers from their catchment zone school to actually transport them, bring a bus to their house and pick them up, and take them to the school of service because they aren't within a 1 mile radius of their school of service. So it's altering that and saying those students are going to actually have a bus arrive at their home and transport them first to their school of catchment zone, and then they would stay on that bus and they would be shuttled to their school of service. Okay? The third routing option would be direct routing to the assigned school, which would mean if I was a family with students in both buildings, I would have 2 buses stop at my house, pick my children up, and directly take them to their school of service. They wouldn't stop in their catchment zone school first. Okay? The other thing that we have considered is obviously the impact on routes for other schools. You're going to see some details in the next slide about the possibility of it costing us up to 9 additional drivers and up to 4 additional monitors, with something that isn't represented in these costs of the possibility of additional hours for supervision at the buildings if students have to arrive earlier to be able to make the transition from one building to another. So when we look at the breakdown of these 3 plans, all of them have a base cost associated with them because 6 of the 8 buses that serve these 2 schools also have immediate routes that follow them right now to serve Clear Creek and Summit Elementary schools. And because of the timing between the end of the route and the beginning of the next route, if you add shuttling students between buildings, those buses would not be able to make those routes to serve Clear Creek and Summit. Okay? These are worst case scenarios given the fact that we haven't done a complete rerouting analysis of the entire district. There may be efficiencies that are gained that reduce these costs, but I wanted the board to have the concept of what the maximum costs could be in a worst case scenario without additional efficiencies. So the top line of all 3 of these are exactly the same. If it took 6 additional buses to run the Summit and Clear Creek routes, you are looking at an additional annual cost of $321,327.85 to add those routes, not including the cost of the bus. That's the driver, that's the fuel, that's the maintenance cost. That's an annual ongoing cost if you add 6 additional buses to make that happen. You see under Plan 1, there's no additional buses necessary for Childs and Templeton given that routing plan. It's just the buses to serve Clear Creek and Summit routes. So if we are shuttling walkers and walkers and car riders are coming to the school of their catchment zone and then they're catching a shuttle, there's no additional buses necessary to serve Childs and Templeton. That does impact families because if you have to get to Childs early enough to catch a shuttle to go to Templeton, you can't arrive 5 minutes before school starts and expect your child to get to Templeton on time. So there's an impact there with that. We anticipate with the 6 additional buses to serve Clear Creek and Summit late routes, a maximum addition of 2 bus monitors, bringing another annual cost associated with that decision to $50,820. So Plan 1 has an annual estimated cost of $372,148.33. If you move to Plan 2 requires 2 additional buses maximum to serve the child's Templeton catchment zones if you're transporting the walkers that would normally walk to a school and then catch a bus for a shuttle. So that's an additional $107,109.28. That bumps the number of monitors from 2 additional up to 3 additional, adding $76,230.72 for an annual ongoing cost of $504,667.86 for Plan number 2. Plan number 3 is direct routing, which you heard Mr. Smith talk about duplication of services in buildings that are close to one another. This is where that happens to be the worst, is if we do direct routing, meaning that a bus will come to your house, pick up your child, and take them directly to their school of service, not to their catchment zone school first, and then transport them. So in addition to the 6 buses required for Clear Creek and Summit routes, we're predicting 3 additional buses maximum to service Childs and Templeton in a direct routing scenario, adding $160,663.93 to the base cost, with an increase of monitors to a maximum of 4 for $101,640.96 of ongoing annual cost, bringing Plan 3's annual total to $583,632.74. So as you can see, each of these plans come with varying levels of annual costs associated with them, and the efficiencies of transportation decrease as you move from Plan 1 to Plan 2 to Plan 3, costing us more money. Okay. Moving on next, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about logistics considerations for the movement of materials and furniture between buildings, as well as custodial costs. Again, I want to acknowledge Brad Lucas and Sam Fleener for their collaboration on this portion of this evening's presentation. Our staffing levels of custodial support would remain stable unless there's additional square footage that's added to either building through the merger process and whatever construction decisions that you make. Movement of classroom materials and supplies, as well as personal belongings, both between and within schools, because we anticipate that teachers in a building would probably move classrooms in that same building as space is reallocated. Would be assisted by our custodial and maintenance staff. Our teachers would be provided with boxes, tape, markers to pack and label items for movement. Obviously, we would need to know the building and location and room number of where those things are going, so we would have to have that plan well thought out in advance so that our custodial and maintenance staff could come in and gather up the boxes that are packed by our teachers and support staff and move them to the appropriate new location. We'll need to be cognizant of the additional summer tasks that our internal employees normally complete during the summer. This may require additional contracted services for tasks like painting and small-scale renovation and construction projects, and we haven't represented what those costs might be because we don't know what projects our staff wouldn't be able to complete until we know exactly what grade levels, what buildings, and how we're moving kids. Next, I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about food service merger considerations and acknowledge Director Matt Tomrell for his assistance in providing the board with the information here this evening. Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP, is a classification that is assigned to certain schools in our corporation that allows the school to provide free breakfast and lunch to all students regardless of individual family income levels. To qualify, a school or a district must have at least 25% of students directly certified through programs like SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or TANF, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Program. Those are the ways that families get direct certified. Our current CEP schools in our district include Arlington, Clear Creek, Fairview, Grandview, Highland Park, Templeton, and the Bloomington Graduation School. CEP uses a federal funding model to reimburse schools based on the percentage of directly certified students. The reimbursement percentage is determined by a multiplier, which is 1.6 times the direct certification percentage. Schools can apply yearly with a 4-year renewal cycle, and adjustments can be made annually as certification rates change. Schools above 60% free and reduced lunch rate also receive an additional 9 cents per meal for a severe needs provision on top of the established reimbursement rates. Both schools, if combined this year, looking at this year's enrollment, could meet the qualifications for CEP status. However, the current directly certified percentage, if you combine the total enrollment, if you just look at the total and factor it out, would be 31.6. That would result in a 50.6% reimbursement rate under CEP. That's just 31.6 times 1.6, their multiplier factor. By contrast, currently, Templeton's reimbursement rate is at 91.1%. So you can see that that reimbursement rate would go down, and the dollars that our food service department would receive from the federal government as a part of CEP eligibility would decrease as well. With only partial reimbursement under CEP, additional district funds may be needed to cover meal costs for non-reimbursed students. Some of the benefits that exist with a CEP eligibility status include free meals for all. That helps reduce the stigma associated with free and reduced price meals, and it fosters an inclusive environment. Access to meals also supports improved concentration, academic performance, and overall well-being. CEP supports district goals by reducing food insecurity, promoting equity, and enhancing students' readiness to learn. Lastly, I would like to spend just a couple of minutes discussing staffing with regard to merger considerations. As you are aware, MCCSC has a well-defined staffing process that occurs every spring for every building in the district. Student enrollment and student needs are factors that impact the decisions that are made with regard to staffing. In the case of this merger, we also plan to consider staff members' preferences as we're making decisions. However, we recognize that every teacher may not be able to get their first choice, and we'll work with MCEA leadership to establish the criteria by which assignments and transfers would be made.
Thank you, Dr. Henderson. Now, Mrs. Harmon will highlight several curricular programs and services.
Thank you, President Hennessy, Dr. Winston, and members of the board for the opportunity to present on curricular programs and services. I'll be covering Title I, Extended Day, Multi-Age, our International Baccalaureate, English Language Learners, Special Education, and we already heard about early learning earlier in the evening. I'd like to thank members of my team as well who are seated in the audience and may also answer questions for helping to put this together. And we've all been meeting with members of the community, engaging with them, talking about curricular programs and services in our schools. And this kind of presents some of the complexities and considerations that we've covered. To start, I'd like to speak about Title I and what's referred to as Title I, school-wide Title I services. Of course, Title I are federal funds that are given to the district and then distributed across the schools. And so based on identified needs, to be a school-wide Title I, an elementary school's poverty percentage would need to be above the corporation's poverty average. The corporation's poverty average is 44.89%. Templeton's current average is 64.63%, which qualifies them for school-wide Title I services, meaning all students in the school receive those services, benefit from those services. If students who qualify for school-wide Title I services leave, if students who qualify for Title I services leave, the school could fall below the qualifying average and no longer receive those services as school-wide services. If that were to happen, so if Templeton's school poverty percentage falls below, any purchases made with Title I funds for materials would have to transfer to another qualifying Title I school. Currently, Templeton has 3 full-time teachers, and they would also be transferred to another Title I school within the corporation. And then time considerations. The state of Indiana uses the poverty percentage data from the previous year, so this current year would impact what those percentages for next year. So Templeton, regardless of what happens, will remain a qualifying Title I school for the 25-26 school year. Additionally, corporations are allowed to use a one-time grandfather clause to aid in a school's transition out of Title I services, and then that would potentially offer another year of school-wide Title I services. However, that grandfather clause is one time for the whole corporation as well. It's important to note. When we look at extended day, merger considerations are the things that we discussed. We really focused on ensuring extended day support for students and addressing the needs of families that would have children at both locations, ensuring that there would be adequate space and staff for the number of students in the program. As a note, our highest enrollment at extended day, perhaps not surprisingly, is in kindergarten through 2nd grade for those students. So we would predict a larger number of students in extended day if there were a primary building and an intermediate building at the primary building, which would require higher adult to student ratios at that building, and then of course that would require probably additional staffing for the large number of students and also consideration of space. In a primary intermediate model, if that were the building configuration for extended day, we would look at Childs and Templeton continue as autonomous programs with a site at each school, and intermediate siblings only could be transported, if chosen by the families, from and to the primary school to allow families one pickup point. Currently, there are 6 Childs families who are currently using extended day and who would have a student both in a primary school and an intermediate school. There are 6 at Childs, and there are 5 families at Templeton that also fall into that range. When we look at special education merger considerations, it's important to note this is highlighting student services and staffing allocations are determined based on individual student needs regardless of grade or school. So that happens no matter what. Students with one-on-one support continue to receive one-on-one support as indicated in their individualized education program, also often referred to as an IEP. The special education one-on-one aids follow students during any and all transitions. I'd like to note that a majority, about 85% of our students with disabilities spend most of their day with non-disabled peers in the general education environment. MCCSC's intensive special education programming, sometimes called our community-based classroom, is not located at every MCCSC school. Currently, Templeton does house a community-based program. Of course, our special education positions are funded through federal special education grants. So the things that we have continued to hear from our community and are looking to implement through a merger consideration or continuity of support for students across buildings and maintaining that high special education teams. We will always be looking to balance students to staff ratios based on that configuration. We could have a potential increase in staffing as we support students for the transition before and after, and then also looking at increasing in staffing and transportation for transition services. What we call sometimes extended school year services as we think about, and that happens now if the need is identified for a student that they need extended school year services to help between one grade and the next grade, those things are in place, and so we've discussed how we could use that model to ensure to help with transition supports during this time as well. A huge theme of things that we discussed was ensuring that the receiving staff understand individualized student needs that are not necessarily captured in an IEP. Our special education staff and teachers at both schools learn so much about students, the soft information, the things that they know that makes them really effective. And we would want to have a mechanism in place for passing that information along, for sharing that information. Again, we would want to make sure that we maintained classroom space for the delivery of special education services. I said this last month is just teachers and schools are resourceful. We can do things in a lot of ways, but it doesn't mean it's the best way. We need to make sure we have protected spaces for these services. As I mentioned, community-based classroom is currently at Templeton. So we're considering, and the complexity of, do we have a community-based classroom at both schools so that there's a primary and intermediate school, or do we move our community-based classrooms? And if we do not, if we keep it, how do we make sure that we introduce a complex classroom to a school during a point of transition, that it would be well supported and successful? And then we also have a special education pre-K classroom, and we would want to keep that at the primary school. It's whatever was identified primary school. When we look at the needs of English language learners, in our ENL program as a whole, right, the essential elements, regardless, are providing developmental language development support, language access for students and families, that interpreting and translation. Currently, our model is to pull out for small group instruction for English language learners. We group students by English proficiency and grade level. We want to remove those language and cultural barriers. And we're particularly aware of our newcomer population, which are refugee students, which is growing each year, who not only have a potential language barrier, but often are in transition, may not have the same kind of transportation and housing supports that some of our other students do. Currently, Templeton has one full-time ENL teacher, and Childs has a half-time, depending on the distribution of students. We may need a full-time teacher in each building, but we wouldn't know until we saw the grade configuration and where the needs end up. Thinking about multi-age merger considerations and the conversations that we've had. A little bit of a history of the multi-age program. The multi-age program began in 1995. During this time, all of Templeton was a multi-age school with a kindergarten and then 1, 2, strand 3, 4, 5, 6 classrooms. It was designed to foster strong, long-term relationships among students, teachers, and families while providing a flexible and inclusive learning experience. Since 2005, the program has evolved with different iterations. It's presently multi-age exists within Templeton as 2 separate strands, typically comprised of K through 2, a 3, 4, and a 5, 6 classroom. So there are 6 teachers altogether. The educational approach of the multi-age program is differentiated instruction across grade levels, a community of learners gathering together. Each year, their students are expected to do at least one focus study, and it's a research project that's chosen by the students that they explore. They also have what they refer to as invitations, which are learnings from inside and outside the building generated, again, by students. A huge portion of the educational approach is looking at peer learning and mentoring that exists between those older students and the younger students. A great theme, as we talked about multi-age, and a true strength of the program is the long-term relationships with parents, teachers, and students. And they enhance those relationships through their daily community meetings, opportunities for siblings to connect, sing-alongs, and the lunch recess as a multi-age community. Again, as we look at considerations, one of the essential elements that we were protecting, continuity of care, that long-term relationships we referred to, wanting to have consistent conditions for student relationship building, both students to students, teacher to teacher, teacher to family. It's important that students have that inquiry, agency, and advocacy. Those mentorship opportunities are forefront, fostering inclusion, and intentional grouping across grade levels based on where students need skill development, support, exploration. When we think about the complexities in places, we look at the merger and the and the desire to balance SES is to have, and again, we're thinking about future. What does the future look like if these merger happen to do these things? We would want a mechanism in place to ensure SES balance also in the program. So the composition of the program would need to reflect the overall composition of the entire school. Currently, students continue in the program year after year, which may limit opportunities for new students to enter the program, and families are guaranteed spots for siblings. So how do we ensure we build community that's inclusive of the multi-age and straight grades? What do we do for the students to ensure inclusivity? And currently, multi-age student schedules do not allow them to have lunch, recess, or specials with straight grade classes. And through conversation, we've even, talked about models that the ALPS program, for instance, is implementing to ensure a lot of the reason why it exists right now has to do with just kind of scheduling constraints. And so creative approaches to how schedules could be modified so there could be some opportunities for that. And then just as we always would, ensuring time for staff for opportunities for common prep, for collegiality and professional collaboration. Two potential paths for merger for the multi-age program. If the schools are merged as a pre-K through 3 and 4 through 6, you could have 2 K through 1 classrooms, 2 through 3, 2 4 through 6, and then you could possibly implement a looping grade for the grade levels 4 through 6. This was something that came up through conversation as just a note of what we discussed at the intermediate levels. The content area sometimes the content level and the standards get more explicit, and so it sometimes requires more of a need to be able to focus on specific grade level standards. So looping, which refers to when a teacher would travel with a group of students, so they would have a group of 4th grade students, they would teach 4th grade, they'd loop to the 5th, or they'd have a group of students, 4th through 6th, they'd take a year teaching 4th grade standards, 5th grade standards, 6th grade standards, and then with a new group of kids, loop back around 4th, 5th, 6th grade standards. That's a possibility. Again, then also, if schools are merged as a pre-K through 2 and 3 through 6 model, you could do 2 K through 2 classrooms, 2 3 through 4 classrooms, 2 5 through 6 classrooms, and again, you could do a possibility of looping grade levels for 3 through 6. Again, you wanted some opportunities to focus on some grade level standards as the program kind of, as you made some determinations with the group of teachers who are working on that. I just want to make a note that we're not representing pre-K in those strands because of regulations with NACE and Paths to Quality. Pre-K programming would not be included in the multi-age classrooms. Both schools are international baccalaureate programs. And then when we look at that, what that means is they're authorized as part of a rigorous process. They use structured inquiry across subject levels. There's transdisciplinary skills that are essential. Those are thinking skills, comprehension, application, dialectical thought, analysis, synthesis, evaluation, metacognition. The IB learner profile is a huge aspect of what it means to be an IB school, and it develops inquirers, knowledgeable thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk takers, and balanced. So I'm going to quickly pull up my slides here. Hold on just a second, because those are a little bit, just to make sure I don't leave out any essential information as I look at it. Schools must have a designated IB coordinator. They currently have IB coordinators right now that are working in their buildings. They could be shared. This could be a shared responsibility to have more collaboration. That's something that we've discussed in a consideration. Any staff new to IB community would need to participate in the training. We have mechanisms already in place as we onboard new staff in both of those schools and any of our other IB schools. But essentially, grade level teams would really need time to collaborate on their shared units of inquiry, which is a key component of the IB program. And funding would need to be provided for that collaborative time for teachers. And I will turn it over to Dr. Finley for health and safety merger considerations. Thank you so much.
This will be brief. There's only one slide, but I wanted to make sure that we did note the health services and the student services that our students receive at Templeton and Childs. The number of chronic health care needs at each school will be considered for sure, and current students with chronic health care needs at Childs, there are 78, Templeton, there are 52. Any transition that happens with students, obviously the healthcare departments will be working closely together. We'll make sure that meetings are established with families to ensure the healthcare plans are taken care of. We do have things like diabetes, seizures, food allergies, asthma, all of those things need to be considered, and we'll make sure that we certainly have all those students on our radar. Within student services, the number of student service needs at each school will also be considered. Our current students receiving services through the social worker at Childs, we have 150 students. At Templeton, 203. Those two social workers work very closely together. So any transition that happens, we'll make sure that meetings are established and a clear transition plan is in place for any students who are considered at risk, and they'll have some good conversations and great plans in place. And as far as safety goes, the site location plan for possible shuttle bus transitions will occur at each school. Principals will work with school resource officers to identify safe and reliable traffic patterns for arrival and dismissal. We'll minimize foot traffic around school buses. That always makes me nervous as a former principal, and we'll make sure we have a great plan in place before that starts. The transportation department is working on the best safe passage routes, and MCCSC will work with the city of Bloomington to ensure crossing guards are in place at all busy pedestrian crosswalks.
Thank you, Dr. Finley. At the end of the day, our team has and must grapple with the impact that all of these decisions that you've heard about for the last several minutes will have on the children within our schools. We do not have the luxury of only considering the impact on some of the children. The learning experiences that we provide within the walls of our schools are high quality and are of the utmost importance. Our collective commitment is to ensure that we are examining the impact of each of these decisions on everybody's children, our community's children. As we've worked together as an administrative planning team, I challenged my team to reflect on whether or not the considerations that they were bringing forward would be good enough for their own children, for the children within their families, the children that they know. This was a very, very important and emotional conversation to have because I wanted to make sure that we would only put ideas on the table that we would think acceptable for our own children as well as our families. In the end, if their ideas were not considered good enough for their own children, then in my estimation, they would not be good enough for the children impacted by this merger. That is, in fact, the ultimate measure by which we have tried to do our work over these last several months. Recently, the Board of School Trustees outlined their commitments and guiding principles that undergird their stated priority of achieving SES balance throughout our schools. In so doing, they clearly articulated why this matters, what types of experiences that they desire for our children, and ultimately the types of accountability measures that they will hold me and my team to monitoring. And that's what led us to thinking about student impact and identifying pathway considerations to achieving SES balance. With all of this in mind, we have identified 4 potential pathways to achieving SES balance. Perhaps that there are others that one could consider, but these are the ones that we have identified. You've heard a lot of information about how educators in our community do school. What we have shared tonight are just some of the numerous considerations that we successfully tackle each and every day. Each of the 4 pathways that I am about to outline can be successfully executed. Regardless of the selected pathway, great attention to detail in terms of impact on student learning, pain points that our families have talked to us about, and transition supports for our families, our teachers, and staffing implications are all paramount. This first pathway is a full merger fall 2025. What we would do in August of 2025 is that we would have 450 students who would move from whatever school is identified as the new primary school or to the school that is identified as the intermediate school. So we would move 450 students in fall of 2025. Our 1st through 3rd grade students would move to the primary school, and our 4th through 6th grade would move to the intermediate school. In the fall of 2026, we would begin the process of moving some of those students back to the other school based upon grade level. For example, if a student is a 2nd grader now and they would become a third grader in fall of 2025. When it's time for them to transition to fourth grade, they would make a second move back to the intermediate school, but they would do that in fall of 2026. We also would be enrolling our preschool, our pre-K, and our kindergarten students into the primary school. With a begin time for planning and preparation in January, that would afford 7 months of preparation time to move the 450 students in fall of 2025. For additional detail, let me kind of share this. From January to July of 2025, on the left-hand side of the slide here, you will see a number of transition, preparation, and planning activities and efforts that would need to occur. For our teachers, we would have to focus on our staffing alignment, moving materials, classroom setup, professional learning, and we are working on establishing what that professional learning plan would look like, student transition supports and assessment, and ultimately, successful implementation by August of 2025. For our families and for our students, we got to get the word out and begin the messaging process, and we need to have a very strategic and intentional messaging strategy. Community building, we'd want to establish what the community building activities would look like. We've heard a number of amazing suggestions and ideas from our teachers, from our families. We want to begin to establish the new school norms, the new climate, the new culture that will in fact exist upon this merger. And then certainly making sure that our students are provided adequate transitions and support. So just to kind of reiterate, in fall of 2025, August, 450 students would move to whichever school is now their new school. For each year after 2025 and beyond, we anticipate and we're projecting approximately 60 students would move as incoming students. So I think what we would look at is those students who are exiting the primary school would then transition, going into fourth grade, into the intermediate school. And right now, our numbers suggest that that's going to be approximately 60 students. And in the fall of 2026, the fall of 2027, the fall of 2028, approximately 80 students each of those 3 years would move back to the other school. So that's one pathway that we can in fact effectively execute. Another pathway to doing this work would be a full merger fall of 2026. And to put it into the words of some of our teachers, just pull off the Band-Aid. So the first one I just shared, pull off the Band-Aid. This one, fall of 2026, pull off the Band-Aid. Exact same iteration of the numbers of students and the move back to your original school. We would just have a longer ramp for that to happen. And here we would have 19 months to do all of the preparation work that you heard me talk about previously. So this is all exactly the same thing with the exception of the initiation would be in August of 2026. A third pathway that certainly we could execute is a phased merger that would begin in fall or August of 2025. In a phased merger plan, 60 fourth grade students would move each year. 0 students would experience a second transition. Again, we would have our preschool, our pre-K, and our kindergarten enrollment, and we're anticipating anywhere from 70 to 75 students in that category would enroll into the primary school. The primary students would move into the intermediate school. And so if you look at the table below, you'll see the new primary and you'll see the new intermediate. So if we were to begin a phased merger in fall of 2025, in the new primary building, whichever building that is, we would have pre-K through 3 students and 5th and 6th grade students. All of the 4th grade students would move to the new intermediate school in that same year. And in that year, you would have grades 1 through 6 in the intermediate school. In the second year of this phased merger, you would have pre-K through 3 and grades 6 in the 26-27 school year at the primary school. And you would then have grades 2 through 6 at the intermediate school. In 27-28, that's when we would achieve full implementation of pre-K through 3 in the primary school. And in the intermediate school, we would have grades 3 through 6. In 28-29, we would continue to have a fully implemented pre-K 3. That would be our second year of full implementation. And then we would have a full implementation of grades 4 through 6 at that particular point in time. That's a 7-month preparation time for 60 students to move each year. Same transition preparation in the left-hand side of this slide, just a 7-month ramp. 60 students would move in the fall of 2025 and each year after as part of the normal transition. And then the final pathway that we've looked at is a phased merger that would begin in fall or August of 2026. Identical movement, identical number of students. The starting point would be 26, 27, and everything moves forward. You have a 19-month preparation time or ramp to begin moving the process. And I think what appealed to members of our team, of all of these, we knew that we could do all of these options. But what we also heard from our families and from the teachers were concerns about students making multiple transitions. And we do know that that is a challenge, and we know what the research says about the multiple transitions. And again, this is identical to what you've already seen. And so we wanted to be able to present just some thoughts and ideas on what a possible pathway to achieving SES balance could look like by putting these 4 considerations on the table. And that concludes our update on Childs Templeton.
Thank you, Dr. Winston. And I do want to say, because, you know, I don't think I just want to thank your team, you know, you and the administrative team, because it is so clear to us how much work you all have done. Not only holding the community sessions, but gathering this data and putting it together in this way. I know it's a long meeting and we're not done yet, but I just want to say that, you know, I know that there is nothing but gratitude on this board for the work that you all have done. And so I just want to sort of highlight that and ensure that you all know that. And I've said it multiple times, but I do want you to just continue to know how much we appreciate. And I've heard from the community, I've heard from, you know, both in person, I've heard through email, I've seen on the feedback form, because I read through every single one of those. So all 70 comments that we've gotten so far, I've read every single one of those. And what I've seen is a lot of gratitude. So whether or not people are fully on board with the merger or the potential merger, what I have seen is that they do feel incredibly valued, seen, and heard by you and by your team. And I think that's incredibly important no matter what the end or the outcome is. I think that the way that we do these things matters. And so I'm just so, so grateful for your leadership in this process.
Thank you.
But now I think, board, we have time for questions and comments and also discussion around some of the things we've seen and heard tonight.
Well, can I first just reemphasize what April said, because I think all the time about how much extra work we've asked the administration to do, and I'm so grateful for it. And there were some comments tonight that seemed like maybe we did something to give the impression that we weren't taking into consideration the advice that we're getting from the administration, and I'm not sure what we did to give that impression. But I just want to say that I'm listening to every word you say. I think that all of us are, and we're really taking it to heart. So if we did something to give a different impression, I apologize for that. I know that you can't speak for MCEA, of course, but I want to make sure that I understand the statement that we heard during public comment. And maybe if you think that I'm interpreting it correctly, you could let me know. What I heard was that the teachers want a decision about grade configuration but that they would like a longer on-ramp beyond August of 2025. So when I hear that the teachers said they want to pull off the Band-Aid, what I'm interpreting that to mean is they want a decision, but not necessarily a faster move or a faster.
Jenny is shaking her head yes,
Okay.
that you have interpreted her public comment correctly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sure I have other questions, but I want to lend the floor to others.
I have one. With regards to the 4 different options that were presented, how would or wouldn't multi-age classrooms fit into that scenario? Those scenarios.
I think that if it is the direction of the board, that we would make it happen on any of those scenarios.
And do we have the capacity to do both of those things at the same time? For example, would we have enough space to do the multi-age configurations that, the potentials that were presented earlier, along with the phase? Thank you. Yes. The different phasing.
I think it was indicated on those slides that the phasing would or could include the configurations of the multi-age that they presented in the K through 2, 3 through 4, 5, 6, or K through 3. I don't remember all of the different configurations, but I think that it was indicated that that would be true.
So the numbers of children that would be moved, we're looking at all the children, regardless of program that they're in. And so we believe that depending upon the decisions of those 6 decision points, that depending upon that, we would certainly be able to accommodate all of the children.
I do have a follow-up question about multi-age then. Are multi-age classrooms or class sizes, as a result of being multi-age and potentially having multiple teachers then, are they bigger class sizes and do they require larger rooms and do we have capacity for that?
I think I'll defer to Assistant Superintendent Harmon on that one, because I know she's been involved in conversations directly with our classroom teachers in the multi-age program.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
The student to teacher ratio of a multi-age class is in line with the student to teacher ratio of regular classes. They're just partnered and integrated in different ways. We have multi-age teachers here, so I want to make sure that I'm representing them as well, and they know their program very well. But yes, they're in line with that. They are bigger just because there are more grade levels.
Gotcha. Okay.
Based on the 4 scenarios presented there, is it safe to interpret that the administration thinks it's best then to have pre-K through 3 and 4 to 6? Is that the determined split?
That is the feedback of our administrative planning team, and also some of the preliminary feedback from our advisory team. But we also recognize that we can, in fact, execute on either configuration.
And I can't remember how that fits with projected building needs and if that was a configuration
Ross, the CSO architecture, that prediction was that the no-cost option, which had kids moving between buildings, was a K2 through K2 at one building and 3 through 6 at the other. So yes, but so that does mean that any kind of K3 configuration does come with associated costs. Not to say that that wouldn't be possible then, it's just saying that there is any K through 3 configuration has a cost associated from a building standpoint. Obviously, they all have transportation costs affiliated with them, but yes.
And based on Preston's presentation, we may even be able to rethink that based on building capacities. So, just a thought.
Are there K through 3 schools? I haven't heard of that before. I know that locally we have a pre-K through 2 and Edgewood and or Ellisville, those schools, I've never heard of a K through 3. Is that something that exists in Indiana?
I don't know that I could speak specifically to whether or not it exists in Indiana. I think it exists. And again, one of our things was looking at kind of guidance around relatively new guidance around from the state around literacy instruction and the science of reading and where I read is. So it's responding in kind of a different and new way. So that's part of it.
So would there be an idea of shifting Rogers and Benford then to pre-K 3?
That is not something that we have discussed.
Oh, okay.
I do think that there is new data or newer data out that does recommend potentially age groupings of up to third grade. It's more like up to age 8, which could be second or third grade, depending on the kid, just in terms of developmental, sort of level and appropriateness. So
It would just seem strange to have one pre-K through because of that, and then have one that is K through 2. That seems inconsistent if we say that one is for a certain reason for learning, and then we're keeping one the other. It's confusing to me.
Well, I don't know how much folks might understand the fact that some of the determination for the pre-K2 model that exists right now is due to space limitations. It's not necessarily that it was the preferred instructional model, but space limitations limited the opportunity to include third grade.
Can we clarify too that the preschool is at Benford?
Mm-hmm.
Our preschool at Rogers.
And that's
Benford
due to
is
space
at
as well.
Benford due to space. It's in the Benford building. Mm-hmm.
I have a question about the multi-age room as well. I noticed that in your presentation on the community classroom for special ed, one of the options you said was moving that classroom to a different building. But for the multi-age room, that was not one of the possibilities, was moving that to a different building.
That's not a model that we looked at.
Okay.
I mean, this presentation, everything that we've seen tonight and that we saw last month shows the intense complexities of everything, but also shows your dedication to detail and paying attention to it also. I'm really grateful for that. It's a lot to think about.
It is a lot to think about, and we wanted to try to do the best job we could to simplify what the decision points are, and hopefully you found that informative in terms of the 6 identified key decision points that will impact and influence the other areas, and hopefully looking at the 4 pathways. Certainly, it's not intended to be an exhaustive list of pathways, but 4 pathways that we saw as doable, depending upon the preference and the direction of the board.
So I'm terrible at logic puzzles. If the giraffe has a red hat, what color is the? I mean, I'm trying to understand though with the gradual changing of the to make the configuration what it would ultimately be. Would that affect the transportation in any way?
I'll let Dr. Henderson speak on that.
Any decision that we make is going to have an impact on transportation. So, yes, we focused specifically in our analysis on a full transition. We did not do a cost analysis on a phased merger. So we were looking at worst case scenario costs for changes to transportation that, as indicated, may become less as we look at the entire routing for the district. There may be efficiencies that are gained there. There's some things to be considered about the transition of the ALPS program from University to Templeton or to Fairview that may result in some gains there of efficiency. But we did not do a cost analysis on a phased merger.
I was just curious about how
Well,
that would work out.
while we have you, Dr. Henderson, my next question was actually for you. So in the shuttle option, it seemed to indicate that there would still be well, let me ask this question. In the shuttle option where you shuttle walkers, so essentially to defray the sort of, or mitigate the pain point of parents having to drop offs, they continue to walk to their sort of school, their home school.
Yeah.
Is that shuttle option utilizing one of our full-size buses and therefore needing another driver, or is that something where we could use one of our shorter or smaller buses? And I don't know what they're called, so sorry. Apologize, Dr. Waddell, but like the activity bus size, right? The shorter buses that do not require a CDL. Is there a potential to use that to help defray some of the potential?
There is not in the plan, because in addition to the walkers that you would have to shuttle, you would have students who would already be on a bus, and they would need to go. So if I'm a bus rider,
Okay.
and I normally ride to Childs,
Gotcha.
and if I'm a walker who normally walks to Childs,
Yep, I see.
in that model, the bus riders would stay on the bus that they rode to Childs on. Walkers would board that bus,
Yep.
and that bus would go then to Templeton.
Okay. That makes
So
sense.
we're trying to minimize the number of transitions for a student so that a bus rider doesn't get on a bus, go to Childs, get off the bus,
Right.
have to get on a different bus,
Right.
and then be transported to Templeton.
Right. And so I guess in my brain, I was thinking of a more, what is it, like hub and wheel sort of, where everybody enters into a particular hub, they all get off and go onto separate buses. So they do have that multiple transition point. So I guess in my head, I was envisioning something like that, but it makes sense what you're saying, that they would pick up the route, stop at Childs, pick up the walkers, and then drive to Templeton. That's essentially, okay.
Correct. That's plan one.
Yep, makes sense.
So we had the complication of the, well, it's all complicated, but the information that we got about the schools from Mr. Smith said that if everybody stayed in their home school, it would change the free and reduced lunch rates of our different schools.
No, he was basically saying for Childs, if everyone, I mean, yes, it would change our rates across the district, but I think in this instance, he was saying for Childs, for instance, which is at 15.5, if everybody that's districted for Childs were to just stay at that school, then that would move that number up from 15.5 to 30 point something %. And so the number changes automatically just as a result of not having transfers out. But what I did ask at a different moment in our training session was, had he accounted for students who either moved out because of, for instance, teacher transfer, right? So transfer of teachers' kids, and or had he accounted for students who'd moved out because of ALPS? And the answer to both of those questions was no, that was simply just taking students that were in parcel, sort of districted to that area, and were moved out for whatever reason. So I don't know that 30 point whatever number is actually accurate if we account for teacher transfers and we account for potential ALPS transfers. And potentially, yeah, exactly.
Kids, yeah, it probably, my guess would it would be less than 30.
I agree. I think that's potentially true.
Can I ask Jenny to nod her head again? I'm still really stuck on this tearing the Band-Aid off thing. Does MCEA have a position on full merger versus phased merger?
Are we allowed to ask this question?
Oh, sorry, I'm not allowed to ask you.
I don't think we're allowed to ask
Can I?
that question.
Can I ask Dr. Winston if she knows if MCEA has a position on that?
I can speculate based upon our conversations. I believe that the perception and the perspective that has been shared with us during some of our advisory meetings is that they would prefer to see a later start, whether that's a phased or whether that's a full-on merger. Mostly, they simply want a decision so that because teachers are planners, and teachers want to start planning as soon as possible for whether it's this coming August or it's August of 26. But I wouldn't want to speculate as to the phased perspective of MCEA, but I know that many teachers did share that as an idea and a suggestion for consideration.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
I think probably one of the reasons why, and I don't know, maybe I'm just projecting, but maybe one of the reasons why you're asking that question is because at some point we did hear from teachers that they wanted when they said rip the Band-Aid off, they had also said that they wanted everybody to move at the same time because it meant that teachers had some of their own cohort in buildings with them at the same time. Meaning, if they were going to move across buildings, they would move with some people that they were already accustomed to teaching with, who they knew from their primary buildings and things like that. I will say, and we're not making a decision tonight, obviously, so that's not going to happen. We're slated to do that in December. But if we're just having a conversation, and I think we should, right, have a conversation about the information we've heard and beyond just the questions we're asking. I will say that I really do not love the idea of multiple moves for students. I think it's harmful and detrimental, and I don't think that we should move students and then have to move them back. So from that perspective, I will say that whatever the timeline is, I'm definitely in favor probably of a sort of phased solution because I don't want to move kids back and forth between the buildings more than once.
That was actually why I asked. I agree that the phased option seems more appealing to me, and I wanted to make sure I understood if there was opposition to that from teachers specifically. Other thoughts or comments or questions?
I mean, I appreciate all the work that's put into this, and I know, I mean, sort of one of the main issues for me, and I know it's not possible, but we're making a decision. We're acting like redistricting this as separate decisions, but they're not really. So for us to make a decision in December without having the full information about what redistricting would look like is I think difficult for me.
I agree.
And so again, I know that the teachers want a decision, I want a decision, but I think it's hard because with if the board wanted to look more at redistricting, like are we looking at like a full 6 months to a year to get 3 options? Like that's because if we could have 3 options of possible options of redistricting along with this, I think it would be a lot easier for me and maybe for the rest of the board to say, okay, now we can see a fuller picture and not just do piece by piece, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Brandon, I will say that I agree with you, and I've been wrestling with this in part because, well, and this is part. We had a board training last night in our executive session on redistricting from from Preston Smith and what that would look like. So, but I know Brandon, you were sick and unable to be there, so some of that kind of stuff I think was discussed last night that potentially that information is missing for you. But I I don't quite know, and this is just like if I'm being honest, like I wrestled with this last night. I actually don't know how to proceed, right? And so I think that that's why I'm asking us to have a real conversation about this because I know that people are waiting for a decision in December, and I know that we have said in our resolution, which is not binding, it's not a policy, we can change it and make whatever decision we'd like, that we would make a decision by December. The problem is, if we really are going to look at the potential of redistricting and what that would look like alongside the merger, I don't know how we can make a decision next month, right? And so I think we need to decide and not vote and make a decision, but I think we really need to consider what December will look like for us and what we want to do with the information that we've gotten from this study.
Yeah, it's just interesting if sorry I was sick last night.
No, it's okay. You can't
but
help it. You're sick.
but if I missed something, why hasn't anybody else brought that up?
What do you mean?
Like I feel like I'm bringing that up now and I wasn't there. I'm just curious, what am I missing?
You're not missing. I
Oh,
think
okay.
we were headed in this conversation. We just were asking questions about the stuff that we've gotten
okay.
already.
My interpretation was, were you thinking the options were going to take longer? Because it seems like Preston had said if we could give him some direction, he could in the moment plug in some different models. But we need to, as a group, decide: do we want to focus on utilization? Do we want to focus on SES?
No, I understand that. Yeah.
So
I just think the turnaround time would take as long as which I understand this. Like, if we get actual options, like these are the three options. Even if one is utilization, one like I don't feel like
He
we can
has
decide
them.
on those.
He has them.
Yeah. Well, I
But
think we need both of those up front to make.
he has them. The question is, there's 14 different scenarios.
Yeah, I mean we can.
And
That's
right. So the question is, how do we narrow down from those 14 scenarios?
I mean, the administration narrowed down. I'm sure they had 14 scenarios for this. So I would hope that the administration could narrow down and hand us here's the 3 to 4 like we have with this.
Based on what we heard last night, I don't think that's a realistic. I don't think that that's a realistic assumption to think that we could get those by December.
Oh, I didn't say December.
Oh, okay.
No, I just said to make a decision.
Oh,
that
yeah,
those
yeah.
should both be together.
Yeah,
So-
no, I agree.
Maybe what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to allow time for that. Any of the enactment of the merger would probably, yay or nay, would probably need to be a 26, 20.
Yeah, I don't even
Seven.
know if I could decide. I don't think I could vote on the merger unless I had both of those.
Right.
So
what
I
I'm
couldn't
saying-
even. I wouldn't even say that.
I think what Ross is saying is that we could take a fall 2025
Off
start
the
date for
table.
the merger off
Yes.
the table.
Because I think that would at least alleviate the anxiety in the room about, is this going to be implemented in 2025? And if the result is that, we want to look at this demographic study and the redistricting study and say, we're not going to take a vote in December because we need to have all of this information at the same time, then I think that that's a different conversation and decision that we should probably have.
I think
We-
they need to coexist.
I agree. And that's where I was hoping to get us to, because I don't know what to do with this information until we have, and so
Oh,
Is that a pause?
it's a I don't know.
want to interrupt you. Go
So-
Kathy, what?
Well, all I was going to say is I think from what I've been hearing from administration, that we/you all need to be able to give them some guidance on those 14 things that also include the merger in them, the different kind of scenarios on, are we looking at utilization and then socioeconomic status? Remember, he said you can't do it all, is what he said. And so, and then we have all the costs that we talked about before of the merger. And so it does strike me that it would be, now that we know that we have such low utilization, like we've had this study, we know that we have low utilization rates of our buildings, certain buildings more than others. We know that we have financial woes. We have to think about how to balance all of that, and I think that takes more time than next month.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
And I'm going to direct it to Mr. Bunger.
Yes.
Does that mean we need to amend last year's resolution or this year's resolution regarding the merger?
Otherwise, to change the timeline?
Correct.
Yes, you can.
Okay. So that's probably something we'll need to do in
Yes.
December.
Agreed.
So I was just going to say that I want to respect the teachers' interest in knowing what's going to happen, but at the same time, I think that alone is not. I agree with what you all are saying, that making a decision in December is too soon, and I hope they might give us grace to understand that we need maybe a few more months, and we could ask Mr. Smith to give us a timeline that we could then share with them on when we might be able to make that kind of decision. And hopefully, if we were able to say something at least like, this isn't going to happen in fall of 2025, that would give them some reassurance that they'll have an on-ramp.
Yeah, because we were all moving in this direction without the information that we got tonight or you got
Right.
yesterday, and that changes things for me
Yeah,
quite a
absolutely.
bit.
Well, and that's why we gave ourselves, in the resolution, it says
Yep.
this exact thing, provided that we don't get different information from the redistricting study. I do think that at least to make the most informed decision, we probably do need to account for what's in here. So I think we need to decide how to proceed there because we have to be able to give guidance both to Mr. Smith and to our administration.
Yeah, based on the training we had yesterday, I'm not comfortable with a 2025 timeline.
Same.
Because I also poured over this last night and today because, obviously training is not going to get you 180 pages done. And there's a lot of things that are included in this demographic study that are big things, and they're not even just school board related issues that are in there. And I think that it really is it's not only going to take us talking about it, but it's going to take our city and county elected officials to also be talking about the things that are in here and that what Mr. Smith presented this evening about our overall demographics and where our population is growing and where it's shrinking and how that impacts everything, along with if a school or schools were to close, all the complexities that go in with that and what happens to those buildings as a result.
Right.
There's just a lot, and I'm not ready.
Well,
I hadn't expected closing Childs to be on the list of things he considered. That obviously makes a huge difference. And maybe we decide to take that off the table, but I don't think we're deciding that tonight.
No. And he did mention Arlington as well.
Correct. Yeah, I don't think that was in his 14.
It wasn't.
That
That was number 15.
Yeah, that was his like off the cuff sort of
Yeah,
one, I think.
in case you wanted a 15th idea. There was some overlap. At the executive training last night, he did go into a bit more detail about each of those 14 scenarios. So I hope that you have access to that. And then in terms of talking about our priorities, is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should because we're going to have to give those priorities to the team.
So I guess for me, I would say that my highest priority is still probably balancing SES, balancing free and reduced lunch. I say that in part because I think that prioritizing utilization might result in some of the highest recommendations, meaning closing. He said that if you want to maximize your utilization, that means closing schools, but I think there are considerations in our state that are going to still mean that that's not the best option for us. And I also like that he said that we could weight these priorities. So it's not that we have to say we aren't prioritizing utilization, just that maybe we wouldn't give it as much weight as balancing SES. I do also think that I would prioritize having the fewest number of students move, and I also think that we need to see what the cost associated with each of those options is.
I think the cost implications are probably, even if we get efficiencies from transportation, the cost implications of moving that many students and also then staff across or around buildings is potentially high, but I think we should still need to see them.
And to Ross's point, with the 3 different plans that Dr. Henderson presented us, we couldn't take into account whether there might be some cost savings associated with doing a merger plus other redistricting things. There may be some cost savings there, but we don't have the true number because we don't have both of those things available to us.
I mean, I also know that the process of doing something like this, especially if you're really looking at a district or a redistricting, it's quite extensive. I mean, these are not things. I mean, I know that like IPS has just done it quickly for a variety of reasons, but Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that certainly, so I guess in order to move forward, there are some decisions we have to make tonight, which are, we do need to weight our priorities, probably, because someone has to give some feedback to Mr. Smith. And then we have to give some guidance to our administrative team, because if we take December off the table as the sort of drop dead date of, vote, they have to know how to proceed. So it's not a vote, but I mean, I don't think we should vote, or we're not voting. It's not an agenda item, so we can't. But how do we sort of reach consensus on what those priorities are?
Well, I think first we have to decide if someone's going to bring an amended resolution to the December meeting, right? And then, yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that that the board officers can likely take on amending the previous resolution.
Brandon wrote it. Do you want to amend it? You wrote the original one, didn't you?
Yeah. I think I wrote the resolution. You wrote something.
It was a team of me, Brandon, and Ross.
Yeah.
That's okay. If you don't want it, I'll
be
just
changing the date, right?
Yeah.
That yes. The actual resolution, yes. You did write it, Brandon.
Okay, I think she already changed the date, so.
But I don't know what date it is.
Well, it's not just a date, but it's a process. So I don't know how long the process will take for us to reach those 3 potential solutions. So is it an open-ended item?
So are you saying we need to give Mr. Smith more direction first so that he can give us a timeline when he can provide us with the additional information to base?
And he's quick. I know he's quick.
Then to base our timeline off of?
Yes, but I know that there was some discussion during the executive session about how we arrive at the narrowed down version of those scenarios. And from his perspective, because we did ask how this process works typically, he said that typically he works with a group of individuals from the school, the community. It's essentially a group that gets together and is educated on these various scenarios, and then determines which of these scenarios is sort of the most effective solution. And so that process is probably not a super long one, but it's not a short one. I think he said something like 6 weeks, I think.
It's pretty quick.
But you have to first assemble that group, right?
So
So,
is it, oh, go ahead.
So maybe what we need to do is add an agenda item to the December board meeting to discuss priorities in those scenarios, add it as a discussion item, possibly come to a decision in December as we all have a chance to think about it, and at the same time amend the previous resolution to extend our time frame.
Yeah. Okay. I think we bring the amended resolution to the board meeting, so that's an agenda item. Yes, we can put this on as discussion. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. I think that's fine. It's 4 weeks. I think that he was hoping to get some feedback sooner about priorities from us so that he could move into the next part of the process, but yeah.
We could probably find out between now and our next. We could ask him what's the turnaround from the time we give you the priorities till the time when you could give us a narrowed down list of our options.
I think we do need to ask if we're going to amend the resolution to have some future date, so that probably is necessary.
And then to your point about the administration, I guess I'd ask Dr. Winston, is there something else that you would want from us by December?
I think that what I would want and what my team would need is the level of dialogue that you're engaging in regarding the prioritization. I think being crystal clear on what the priority is the most essential piece of information that my team and I would need to be able to move forward in any direction. what is clear and what I think I've communicated is we can do anything, and we can do anything well, but we cannot do everything. And your ability to give us the prioritization allows us to allocate resources in terms of personnel, time, and money to execute your directive. Does that help?
It does. Thank you. I'll try to stop putting you on the spot.
I don't mind.
Do you have anything to add at all to this conversation that you might want to say or perspective or?
Well, yes.
I am inviting you to do so.
Well, thank you for that opportunity, President Hennessy. You know, to tackle a merger process is and to do it well is a very time consuming endeavor, and to also simultaneously tackle a redistricting effort, which is uprooting many people, is also a very time consuming endeavor. And often schools across the country do not engage in both of them simultaneously. It's pretty much unheard of. And so I think it's important to give that some consideration. And I think the degree to which we can be crystal clear on what's the most essential piece of information and where do we want to be and what are the long-term implications of those decisions, that has to be at the foundation of any determination and any identification of priorities. I appreciated hearing what Mr. Smith had to say this evening about our building utilization. That's not a news flash for us. I think that having the numbers is very helpful, looking at some of that data. And while I do think that there are a variety of approaches to how we calculate building utilization, I think there are certainly some opportunities for us. And so being able to collectively give me the direction that I need based upon what you prioritize is really the most essential piece. And what we've attempted to do regarding the April resolution for the merger conversation is to be able to highlight all of the complexities and all the aspects to that. And I think that there are even more complexities than what we've highlighted regarding the merger when you undertake a redistricting effort, both of which I've participated in over the course of my career. And you have to be very careful in a lot of different ways. And I'll probably leave it at that for the moment.
So I'm not gonna speak for you, but it sounds like it would be helpful if we, in the near future, decided on which of those directions we would like to go and take one completely off the table.
I would suggest doing so.
I agree.
Well, it sounds like we're going to make some more decisions in December about how to proceed. And what's clear is that there's still a lot of questions to answer at this point. So, yeah, okay.
I would just say that in the list of 14 scenarios that he laid out,
Yes.
some of them involved a merger. So I think that
Yes.
He's already done some of the work in terms of collapsing that
Yes.
conversation.
There were at least two of those options that were mergers that then sort of, they merged the populations of Childs and Templeton and they fiddled with boundaries a little bit in other spaces. So it wasn't like a full redistricting, but it was a kind of hybrid of sorts. Okay, so, well, thank you everyone for that discussion. We are nearly there now. I'm wondering if we have any final comments or reports from the board regarding committees or anything else?
I just have a quick report from High Ability, which I wasn't able to attend, but I got the synopsis. It sounds like they're evaluating where they are, like who's at the table on the High Ability Task Force and who else needs to be at the table. they're looking over the high ability plan that's required for them to turn in every year for the state, by the state. And they are continuing to find ways to combat the underrepresentation of priority populations in the ways that students are identified.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, anyone else? Dr. Winston, do you have any additional information to share tonight?
I do. I'm very excited to share with you that we have several Lilly finalists. The Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County has announced the 10 high school seniors selected as finalists for the 2025 Monroe County Lilly Endowment Community Scholarship Program. Of those 10, 7 of them are right here in MCCSC. I would like to offer congratulations to Sophia Kryatu, to Tamana Faisal. Sophia is at Bloomington High School North. Tamana is at Bloomington High School South. Zoe Gray is at Bloomington High School South. Isha Harbaugh is at Bloomington High School South. Cole Harbaugh is at Bloomington High School South. Gavin Kocher is at Bloomington High School North. And Mackenzie Rails is at Bloomington High School South. A formal announcement will be made in December as to the 2 scholarship recipients who will receive scholarships that may be used for full tuition, required fees, and a special allocation of up to $900 per year. The special allocation may cover the required books and equipment costs for 4 years of undergraduate study on a full-time basis, leading to a baccalaureate degree at any eligible Indiana public or private nonprofit college or university. I'd also like to extend congratulations to Bloomington North's boys cross-country team. On November 2nd, they ran and won the Indiana High School Athletic Association's state championship. I'd also like to commend the Bloomington High School South football team as regional champions, and they will move on to the semi-state on November 22nd against Decatur Central. The semi-state game will be played at Bloomington South this coming Friday at 7 p.m. We invite our school community to come out and wish them success this Friday. The Superintendent Student Voice Advisory Council, the highlight of my last week. I held the first Superintendent Student Voice Advisory Council on Thursday of last week. Our Student Advisory Council consists of 20 students across our high schools in grades 10 through 12. These students will work on various challenges and concerns alongside our corporation administration. Members of the executive team and I will meet every quarter to tackle several issues from the student's perspective based upon their experiences in our schools. I am beyond thrilled and excited to move forward with this amazing group of young people to continue our efforts to address issues in our schools while inviting our students to sit at the table with our decision makers. The next Listen and Learn event will be on Tuesday, December 3rd at Fairview Elementary. The event will begin with a chili supper. Donations will be accepted and proceeds will go to Fairview's PTO. We ask that you register to attend before November 26th so that we can in fact plan accordingly. You can find more information on our website and through our social media accounts as well. We're excited about our food service department supporting this effort. So, Mr. Tomarell, Parent University. Tuesday, December 5th will be our next Parent University. What is Scholastic Esports? Now, you should all know that because Mr. Gilpin shared that with you back in September. The event will be held from 6 to 7 p.m. here at the CoLab. Our school celebrated our veterans on Monday, November 11th. To all of our veterans, thank you for your courage, dedication, and service. We are deeply grateful for the sacrifices that you've made and the strength that you've shown in protecting our freedoms. It is with a grateful heart that I say thank you. And last, Thanksgiving break. Can't get here soon enough, right? I mean, that's not on the script. Will be from Monday, November 25th through November 29th, and our schools will be closed. Let me repeat that. Schools will be closed. Please take time to be with friends and family. I want to thank this community for supporting our students, our schools, and our teachers. We have 10,000 plus reasons to be the best that we can be. We are grateful that you have chosen to educate your children here at MCCSC. Be safe, and we will see our students and staff on December 2nd when classes resume. That is the end of my report.
Thank you, Dr. Winston. I feel a little bit like we are the season finale of that show Lost. Did anyone watch that? It's like everything was unsatisfactory and there were really no answers to anything. So I know that's a little how it feels tonight. I want to just acknowledge that because I'm feeling it too. But thank you all for being in attendance and for watching and for hanging in there for almost 4 hours. The next regularly scheduled board meeting is Tuesday, December 17th, and with that, we are adjourned.
Board, there's still a lot of things to sign.
Yes.
No, that's totally different.
No, but I think it's like. I use it every day. Gotta get it open. Oh, now how did you do that? I tried. I didn't get the bus.